All right, hey everybody. This is Chris Lucas. This is my show, The Protestant View. I might be changing that show name in the future very soon, but anyway, today I have my very special guest, Jared H. Beck. He is the author of What Happened to Bernie Sanders. He's an attorney. He even brought a lawsuit up against the DNC, which is the Democrat National Convention. Um, and so I don't know. Do you want to just go in a little bit of background about that, maybe, or
Yeah,
before we
sure.
dive into things?
Yeah. For folks who don't know, there's always people that sort of, that's sort of the interesting thing about um, politics in this country is that people sort of join the fray or the conversation or what you will, sort of in the middle, and they may not have knowledge of what happened 5 or 10 years ago. But it's important to look at history in order to understand what's going on today. And we have we're on the eve of another election. I know it's getting a lot of people upset, getting a lot of people anxious, because I think that's sort of what elections have become in this country is a time of high anxiety and social conflict, and they've sort of lost their purpose as a procedure for selecting the leaders of a democratic republic. But I am an attorney based in Miami, Florida. My legal practice has been devoted primarily to civil litigation on behalf of consumers, small businesses, injured persons, and so forth. I used to do a lot of real estate litigation, and that's actually how I first came into contact with Donald Trump, which a lot of people actually don't know, is that my wife, Elizabeth, who is also a lawyer and happens to be my law partner as well, had extensive litigation experience against Donald Trump from I want to say 2009 through 2014, related to a real estate project in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, that went belly up, of which Donald Trump claimed to be the developer. And we ended up suing him and others to try to recover money that had been invested in the project by various investors. In the course of our litigation against Trump, we actually ended up going to trial against him in 2014 in Broward County. And it was before he had announced his candidacy for the 2016 election. But I don't know if you remember this, Chris, but there were, already in 2014, there were sort of rumblings around the idea that Donald Trump was going to run. And at that time, nobody took Donald Trump or those rumblings seriously.
Yeah, 'cause it was something like the Reform Party or something like that.
That's true. He had actually made, I think, in 2010 or 2012, like a half-hearted attempt to run for governor of New York. I mean, he would sort of announce for president and not really do it. So people just assumed it was kind of like a publicity stunt, that he wasn't a serious candidate. And it's hard to remember back to these times because people who were younger, weren't paying attention back then, may not remember sort of the pre-presidential Donald Trump. This was he was a celebrity businessman, right? I mean, he was somebody who had developed a lot of real estate in New York and other places. He had his hit show, The Apprentice. He was the owner of the New Jersey Generals and the USFL sometime, but he wasn't anyone that people really took seriously as a presidential candidate. What's interesting is that in the course of our litigation against Trump, when you litigate a case very intensely, as we did over those years against somebody, I mean, we ended up deposing him on 3 separate occasions. We went to trial against him in Broward County. So we spent a lot of hours in the same room as him and actually got to know him fairly well. And at the time, all this was happening, I would call myself, a pretty standard Democrat. I mean, that's sort of my background. My dad was a big labor union guy in upstate New York. Upstate New York, was a very blue area of the country at the time. Most people were Democrats. I mean, that was my background. And, I didn't really give it a whole lot of thought or reflection. I was never that politically active myself. I was just focused on my legal practice. But something shifted for us in the Trump litigation, because after we were done with litigation, and then Trump threw his hat into the ring, and we saw all of the media and really everybody that we talked to writing him off as a candidate. Having spent a lot of time with him, I became very alarmed, again, as a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat at the time, because I came to the conclusion that this was not somebody that you should underestimate, and it was not somebody to just laugh off as a joke. I mean, that this was that he was actually a very serious person when it came to his political ambitions, and that just from deposing him, dealing with him in litigation, just really getting to know him about as well as you can get to know somebody in a litigation adversarial context. It occurred to me, he was very, very sharp, very quick on his feet, and somebody that probably would stand a good chance of connecting with the public should he choose to win for office. That was my assessment, just my objective assessment, because that's the kind of thing you're thinking about when you're preparing for a jury trial. Is this witness going to connect with the jury when the case goes to trial? Are they going to really, or are they going to make a poor impression on the jurors? And we had our trial, and we ended up losing to Donald Trump. The jury returned a verdict against our clients. And I have to say, seeing him in the courtroom, I saw a man who, as a witness, did have the gift of being able to connect with a jury. And remember, a jury is basically just average people selected from a pool of potential jurors, right? So not everybody can, connect, especially if you're, at the level he is. I mean, it's real difficult for a lot of these people that live in their billionaire celebrity world to, be able to have like a conversation with the man or woman off the street. I mean, they don't have that ability. I mean, that's true for most of them. And I say that from personal observation. I mean, Donald Trump's not one of those people. Okay. And I think that's probably apparent now to everybody who's, seen him, run. I mean, now he's on his third presidential campaign. I mean, this is a guy that draws massive numbers to his rallies, and he does so for a reason. But again, this wasn't well known at the time because he wasn't taken seriously as a presidential candidate.
Yeah,
So
I don't
nobody
think
would.
anyone took him serious until about almost 26. I mean, yeah, right about 2016, because I certainly didn't. I
Right.
mean, I was really kind of shocked, and I thought it was almost like a joke, or maybe he was
Hmm.
just throwing his name out there to get popular, and use it as a way of just getting himself some more publicity. But he wasn't serious, or no one was going to take him serious, and I was really shocked. um I was shocked personally when I saw, like, um how everything started to steamroll.
Yeah,
So
I mean that's really a great way of putting it, and I think that your view of the situation was sort of the normal view, and the expected view, and you would have had to have been in a position that Elizabeth and I were in, litigating this case, and really getting to know him at a personal level to see that there was more to the picture. That this was somebody, and this was somebody who, when you ask him questions at deposition, was very quick, very succinct, very to the point, not prepared or canned or evasive like you see a lot of uh, poor witnesses at depositions. And then at trial, he was able to win over a jury of ordinary citizens in a fraud case, which is a hard thing to do. And we had excellent evidence against him, by the way. It was not a slam dunk case for him. It was a really a very hotly contested case with really good evidence on our side. So knowing that, and again, here I am, dyed in the wool Democrat. I'm just kind of following my script here. I'm thinking, well, this bodes really bad for the Democrats if they don't take this guy seriously. I mean, he's a real threat, not only to win the Republican nomination, but to go on and win the presidency. Because I honestly don't see a lot of um, uh, at the time, and I still don't. A lot of politicians with his particular approach that connects to large numbers of people at this point in American history. The one exception to that at the time was Bernie Sanders, right? The
right,
other, the
yeah.
other one, the other person that was attracting huge numbers at his rallies. And so that was where sort of our attention turned to, and that's how we became involved. Is initially as Bernie Sanders supporters. It was because of our experience with Donald Trump and trying to be, quote unquote, good Democrats in supporting a candidate that we thought would be able to meet the challenge that Donald Trump was going to bring in 2016. And of course, we know the story. Others may not be as familiar with it, but the Democratic Party was not going to have anything to do with Bernie Sanders being the nominee in 2016. Okay, that was Hillary Clinton's year. It was her turn. And as far as the Democratic Party was concerned, all of us Bernie Sanders supporters, could sit and spin because our candidate wasn't going to get the nomination under any circumstances. I didn't know that going in as a supporter in the process. This was the first, presidential campaign that I gave significant money to, significant time to, both my wife and I. But when we started to see the things happening to the Bernie Sanders campaign by the DNC, rigging the election on the ground and in the media, it really started to make us very, very angry because it was starting to become clear where this was all headed. And of course, this is before WikiLeaks dropped its bombshell internal documents from the DNC, sort of laying out the smoking guns from the DNC's own servers about what their plan was to ensure that Hillary Clinton became the nominee in 2016. So once it was Goose. I don't know if you remember it, but there was an entity called Guccifer
I do
2.0.
remember that, but I
Yeah,
can't remember what it was all about. But I do remember hearing those
it was a
names.
prelude to WikiLeaks. It was sort of the and it's actually also the origin of the Russia hacking narrative, which is that there was this this it wasn't WikiLeaks that obtained the first tranche of documents. It was this shadowy hacker who called himself Guccifer 2.0 that basically put a bunch of documents from the DNC servers on a WordPress website. And after Hillary Clinton was basically handed the nomination, even though Bernie Sanders was getting all of the attendance at his rallies, energizing the base in every state in a way that I'd never seen in my lifetime from the Democratic side. But when Guccifer published the documents, I mean, that was like a gut punch to us because we were people's suspicions were really building as the rigging became more apparent and in your face, not just with irregularities at the polls, irregularities in the primary process, but just in the general media narratives that were being spun that Hillary Clinton was the inevitable nominee. Bernie Sanders had no chance. Of course, they're spinning this narrative before any votes are being counted. So, I mean, that's the definition of rigging right there. But once we got our hands on those internal documents, I mean, this was sort of what I realized is that we had the building blocks for a lawsuit to maybe take some action and bring these issues into a court of law, and at the very least get some get some accountability or the possibility of accountability, because we started getting in, and people knew that we were big Bernie Sanders supporters. I mean, we were very active. We were very much on the out there as supporters. So when people realized that the process had been a sham and that they basically thrown their donations into the toilet for a candidate who was never going to win, I mean, they got really angry. Okay. I mean, you have to realize people spent a lot of money on this guy
And a lot of
and
time. I know
and a
people
lot
who
of time. Yeah.
travel to other states and would
Mm-hmm.
host events, go,
Yeah.
do just tons of things, shows they would try to do to, get Bernie's name out there and
Oh
things like
yeah.
that. And
I mean, lots of time, and from every walk of society too. I mean, that was the interesting thing about the Bernie Sanders movement, was that it really did cut across every societal category. You had wealthy people, poor people, every race, every ethnicity, every religion. All energized by this guy's message. And his message was pretty simple, and but it was what people wanted to hear, which was a candidate that was going to call out the oligarchic nature of American government, the overwhelming influence of corporate power, and do something about it. I mean, that's simple, and that got people super excited. That finally there was a candidate for a major party who was drawing huge numbers that might have a decent shot to win the nomination. Never happened. Never happened in my lifetime.
I think I saw more excitement for him from Democrats than I did, and even independents. I know some people don't like to hear that, but yeah, even independents, if they weren't for Trump, they were for Bernie Sanders. And I don't think I saw that level of excitement even when Obama was running, to be honest.
Oh, for sure.
I thought people were more excited, and Obama looked like some untouchable candidate that no one, you had to be you would have had to have been like a Ron Paul to even probably stand a chance, even though I got my issues with Ron Paul. I'm just putting that name
Hmm.
out there because I know how most people think Ron Paul's a legit candidate. But you would
Hmm.
have to be someone in that sphere where you think, oh, Mr. Constitution or something like that, to
Hmm.
even stand a chance against someone like Obama.
Hmm.
And it's like I felt like people supported Bernie Sanders even more so. So that's why I was like, man, if Bernie Sanders runs against Trump,
Hmm.
Trump's probably not winning. And you
Hmm.
got to think, supposedly, if these are fair elections and he
Hmm.
barely squeaked out a win against Hillary, he would
Hmm.
have got cremated by Bernie Sanders because there was so many. Like, I personally don't know of anyone that was supporting Hillary Clinton. All the Democrats I know, because
Right.
I used to be in the rave scene and the music scene, and
Mm.
I also work a job where I'm talking to like your average person at a gas station or a person in retail and just your average worker. And I'm hearing what just the average Joe is thinking, and they're talking about Bernie and
Right.
sounding pretty excited. So it's like, how did Hillary Clinton win when
Right.
everyone all this energy?
Right.
So
And that's where a lot of the suspicion came from, because everybody felt that same energy. I think you're totally spot on about Obama. I mean, in retrospect, I think he was a totally, I mean, I think he was clearly a very much a manufactured candidate.
uh
And let's not forget that, Hillary Clinton was very much opposed to him when Obama ran, and there was a lot of bitterness between the two. So that was also sucking energy away from Obama. There was, I mean, other than, I guess sort of the let's all, pat ourselves on the back for having our first black president. It didn't really, I mean, it was empty words, right? Hope and change. I mean, it's like, Kamala Harris. It's just another version of Kamala Harris. I'm running on joy. Okay, I mean, these are empty slogans. There's no meat there. This is like child talk. Okay, we're not being serious adults here when we sort of indulge in the idea that this is like a serious political process for adults. But Bernie Sanders was not speaking to the public like they're a bunch of children. At the time, he wasn't. He was putting out very strong ideas. He was talking in terms of revolution, and he was speaking to a country that was very much ready to hear that message. Unfortunately, he basically got squashed, in front of the entire country very unceremoniously by, call it the deep state, call it the real government. I mean, there's many terms for it, but the actual government that actually governs us wasn't going to give us Bernie Sanders, and that became very apparent. So that's really where the genesis of the lawsuit. And you know, look, I got to tell you, in retrospect, I think maybe we were quite naive and foolhardy to even undertake this endeavor and take it as far as we did, because um, election litigation in this day and age, not for the faint at heart.
oh
Okay,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
was amazed when I was reading your book.
well, but let's talk about what happened to all of the lawyers that litigated for Trump after he lost to Biden, right? How many of them got disbarred? Okay, how many of them got lost their law licenses? I mean, we're talking about like people like L. Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman. Okay, I mean
So
these.
these guys lost their license?
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
I wasn't aware of that because I started pulling away when I started getting frustrated with people, so I wasn't keeping up with that at
You
that
mean
point.
the Trump?
Yeah, after 2020, I was so done, man, with
Yeah,
people because I was trying to tell them, dude, like we got to do something else. We got to go a different direction, and
Right.
no one would listen. And
Right. No, you feel like I know exactly what you're saying. You feel like, this is just, I mean, I'm sure you remember all the trust the plan and the
oh,
Q anon and all the nonsense that was going around. In retrospect, those were carefully crafted psychological operations that were, I think, designed to keep the population sort of, mellow, while Trump basically did nothing for his 4 years in office, and in fact, did some very harmful things. I mean, we can talk about those. I mean, the vaccine being a huge, uh, a huge red flag.
a little bit.
Right, but I mean, it's
I
this
mean,
sort of cognitive dissonance that people have when they um, when they think about Trump, and it's kind of sad to see because it's sort of like it's a hump. I fear we're never going to get over. I'm not sure what the source is, but um, this country has a big problem with worshiping celebrities and billionaires, and not really having any other principles in the hierarchy, so to speak. And it's creating a situation. I mean, I think you mentioned when you were emailing me before the show that you have two small kids.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also have two kids. My kids are 13 and 11.
Okay, almost the same age. Mine are just a little bit younger.
So like, I mean, my opinion is that raising kids is probably the hardest thing anyone can do. I mean, it is an enormous challenge to turn to be responsible for raising children into good people, right? I mean, it's a constant. It's a job that really sort of never ends. I mean, when they're sort of babies, you think, oh, you just want them to sort of grow up so you don't have to change their diapers anymore, and they won't, they stop crying. And then when they grow up, you realize that the job doesn't end just because they're older. It actually gets more challenging because you have to sort of, you're responsible for, as a parent, for basically um, charting the outline of the moral development of your kids. And that having becoming a parent, for me, I think, is what sort of propelled me into these endeavors, because you want to, as a parent, you want your kids to grow up in a country where they're going to be safe and they're going to prosper. I think that's natural for any parent, and you're going to do your part to whatever that may be to try to make that happen, right?
Right.
Um, and boy, I got to tell you, what stresses me out these days is, not so much the political situation, because I think I've sort of come to terms with it and I've made peace with it, and I try not to let it psychologically, ruin my day anymore. I know it does for a lot of people, but you can't really let things that you don't have control over, drive you crazy. But what does drive me crazy is the moral vacuum that I see in this country, the severe moral vacuum, and you see it when you have like school age children. I mean, our kids are in public school down here in Florida, and I mean it's like mayhem in the schools now.
Yeah, I
I
can't
mean,
send my kids to school, man. It was like we
you
homeschool our
homeschool?
kid. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I've
Um,
thought about doing that. It's I mean, that's a real challenge. I mean, that you take upon yourself when you do it. But I can totally understand why you would want to. And I have nothing but praise for that route. Um, my wife is, she's a public school product. I'm a public school product. Our view is that we can sort of, um, as long as we keep a close eye on things, like a really close eye on things, we can um, uh, keep them out of danger. But it's not easy, okay? Because the schools are like, okay, they're like awash in pornography now, okay,
Oh
in
man.
ways that weren't conceivable when I was going to school. Middle school. I mean, it's like it is just, awash in pornography. Um, you know, gender euphoria is a real. Um, it's there. I mean, it's being propagated. It's being, these kids are very. Kids are very, very sensitive, and they pick up on all the messaging that's put out there. And I'm not. Look, I am. Do not consider myself, you know, a prejudiced or bigoted person by any stretch. And I like to think I accept all people and in all shapes and sizes and you know preferences and what have you. But um, there are certain. There's been a real attack on the family in this country. There has, and it's ongoing.
It's
Um,
probably designed.
and absolutely, I think it's part of a concerted effort. And it's really, as a parent, it makes you very angry, because this is human beings have been, have had domain over their families for as long as they've been on this earth. And really, the level of government interference with the family unit in this country is extraordinary. In terms of at the propaganda level. It may not, you know, it may not be, um, how to say this. We may think that we live in a, generally like a free market based society based on, individual freedoms, but that's ignoring the whole propaganda element that is really at all-time levels of intensity in this country. And they've been brought to that intensity because social media, um, smartphones, are able to deliver that propaganda in a very customized, intense way, right into the minds of your kids. And it's very apparent. It's very disturbing. I think to watch kids get masked up during COVID
Oh yeah. See,
was,
that's a big reason why I couldn't send my kids to school was things
yeah,
like that going on. Like,
right.
I'm like,
Well,
no, that's gonna
right,
cause brain damage. My
right,
kid's gonna go to school and think that there's a some kind of virus going on that's super scary. And I was like,
right,
because I fought with some people about this. I was like, well, no, if I put on a mask, I'm scaring the children because I'm making them think there's something going on. I'm not doing it. My kids aren't doing it. No one in my family's doing it. Because I'm
right.
like, we're not. And but some people would be like, oh, well, it's polite. Put on the mask and be
Hmm.
polite. And I'm like, no, that's not polite. It's because you're lying to people. That's not something that
Right,
you should be scared of. We're lying to people. If they want to wear a mask, because I noticed they did in China even before COVID and places like that. Okay, fine. You can wear a
right,
mask if you want to, you're coughing, you don't want to get spit flying out. Okay, fine. Because you're sick and you're wearing it. But don't make me wear it to
Right.
think it's preventing sick or acting like everyone's sick, because now it's like you're starting to look at everyone with a mask like, because I always thought if someone's wearing a mask it's because they're sick. So now you're looking at a whole sick, America, and you're going out constantly. Everyone's sick because everyone's wearing a mask, and
Mm.
it's just a bad psychological look, and it's got to weigh on people,
So
and wear on them.
I think you're two very interesting points there. I think the whole mask thing was more about ritual and humiliation than, and I mean there's no medical reason to wear a paper mask over your mouth and nose isn't gonna stop you from catching a virus. It's like let's be adults here, right? I mean, that's number one. So what was the point of that? The point was humiliation, subordination, compliance. Part of, again, it's sort of a, not so much a, I mean, it's a form of propaganda in sort of a, not so much on the screen, but in, making everybody participate in this ritual together. And reinforcing the supremacy of the government, or really the deep state. Because what's interesting is that here in Florida, the attitude towards COVID was substantially different than what you would have found in New York or California. The Surgeon General came out, and the Surgeon General of Florida, and published finding that the vaccines were not safe to take. So that was actually a something. You were able to see some fragmentation in the country, on how that issue played out. But it was a relief for us, because we had our employees at our law practice. I mean, we were able to tell them in good conscience, you don't have to take this
Oh, that's
vaccine for
awesome.
work. Don't do it on our account. Okay. In fact, I'm not going to do it. I'm not putting that in my body. Um,
Well,
and
that's what's so funny though about the Democrats that I knew, because all the way right up until that point, all my, because I got just hundreds of thousands of friends. Well, I used to have them, but up until that point, they were crying about Russia collusion and Trump, Russia. Can't trust Trump. Oh my gosh, this is so scary that we got a Russian agent in our government now. And but then suddenly he locks you down. He signs warp speed, and you don't
Mhm,
want the country opened up. And this is from my so-called Democrat friends. Don't open the country up until there's a vaccine. And so
mhm.
now you're going to trust this vaccine that Trump has been working on since January 13th of 2020, because I have Ivanka Trump's tweet. If anyone's curious, I have her tweet where she says, "My daddy's working on this vaccine," and here it is. It's, and if you go and look at the Moderna timeline, it shows you that they're working on it together. And you can go to their website. I still got the screenshots from it. January 13th of 2020, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, and I have these clips already loaded to play. I mean, if you're interested, it's like 2 minutes, but it's like Democrats saying, talking about how we shouldn't lock down. This is prior to March 11th, March
Right.
13th, when he locks down. So right up and almost until that very day, you got Bernie Sanders saying, "No, I'd keep the border open." You
Right.
got Nancy Pelosi saying, "No, everything's fine. It's just a cold." And meanwhile, Trump's busy working on a vaccine.
Right.
And so it's so weird that the Democrats are demanding people to take this Russian agent's vaccine, and meanwhile, it's
Right.
like, and then it's like, and then you got the cognitive dissidents from the Republicans, because they're like, "Oh, he's our hero, but this looks like the mark of the beast," and it's like, well.
Right. none of it makes logical sense unless you um, have a model which gets at sort of the true structure of American government. Once you understand that all of these figures out there are just controlled puppets who are there to, make people react a certain way, you're not going to be able to piece it together because the pieces don't fit, right? I mean, the Democrats. I remember. I mean, I actually I was banned from Twitter in 2019,
Oh, yeah.
so that even before COVID, I was persona non grata. So I never got to engage in any of those discussions, but that was fine for me because I was super freaked out that well, I mean, first there was COVID, and of course, as soon as COVID comes out, you don't really know what it is, right? I mean, you dig into it, you want to understand it. I mean, and you want to protect yourself. But when you start looking into it, it's got all the telltale signs of, psyop central. And boy, the history of vaccines in this country is not a good one. Um,
Right.
and I feel terrible. The amount of vaccines that we gave our children as part of their, you know, their recommended vaccine course, when they were babies. I mean, my wife and I feel extremely guilty about that because we weren't, knowledgeable enough to say no. I mean, we became knowledgeable enough to say no to the COVID vaccine, and to get exemptions for the kids, which you can actually in Florida. It's pretty easy to get an exemption from vaccines. You just sign a piece of paper, and then your kids don't have to get any vaccines. So that's where we are now. But when they were born, we were like, lambs to the slaughter like everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I mean, it took involvement in this sort of traumatic political escapade to, to discover the true nature of things. So that's a good outcome. I mean, you try to look for the positives. You always try to look for the silver linings in the cloud. And I wonder if our involvement in the DNC case may have ended up saving our own lives in the long run because it got us pretty wise to the reality of American politics and ultimately what's behind something like a mandated vaccine for a mysterious flu. um, but just so bizarre, such a bizarre episode, and one that I think really, I mean, I think that's really when things started to twist into knots. Is when, as you point out, Trump is suddenly, he's pushing the vaccines, he's pushing the lockdowns, um, and he's revealing himself to be, um, a tool of the deep state, just like everyone else, just like Bernie Sanders, just like Hillary Clinton, just like Barack Obama. So where does that leave us, right? I mean, that's the big question. What do we do with all this information other than protect ourselves and make sure like we're you know being extremely careful about what we put in our bodies and extremely careful about whose advice we're taking. I mean, the medical profession, I mean, in my eyes, the medical profession lost extraordinary amounts of credibility as a result of COVID. I mean, can you go to a doctor or a hospital um, after COVID and look at things the same way? I can't.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because I am more nervous, and it's like, well, just to be honest, before that, I would have kind of thought that I could trust doctors a little bit better and that they're always looking out for me. But then I'm like, man, I would think that you would think about everything a little bit more. But now it looks like you're not really thinking this one through and you're trying to
No.
make everyone get it. And now I'm like, what else aren't you totally thinking through? It's
Well,
like,
I had to, remove myself from a doctor's care when he called me a conspiracy theorist, because and he wasn't even trying to treat me with vaccines. I mean, this was for another issue, but I was just kind of, in a very non-confrontational way, raising my concerns with the vaccines. And instead of getting like a measured response, it was like the most outlandish commentary I ever heard from a doctor, which is like, no vaccine has ever harmed anyone in the history of this country, which is just complete and utter nonsense. Okay, I mean, there's a reason that there's a massive autism epidemic in this country. Okay, it just didn't come out of anywhere. I mean, we bombard these children with all kinds of crap when they're born. Okay,
well,
and
bioengineered foods, I can't even find a food that doesn't say bioengineered
mm-hmm,
anymore. It's like almost everyth's bioengineered. I'm like, is this safe? Is this why all these kids are having problems? Because it seems like more and more like I'm okay. I'll be 50 November 5th.
okay.
So I don't remember ever seeing this kind of stuff, growing up. And
No,
now
I'm the same generation of you.
okay.
I'm like, I'm gonna be 48, so we're both Gen Xers. We're sort of born, sort of in the, kind of lumped in a little bit with the baby boomer generation. Sort of this time in the U.S. when I think a lot of things were hidden from view and very, very hard to access in terms of the truth. Because without the internet, boy, I mean, just pick your topic, whether it's the JFK assassination, whether it's um, I don't know, the moon landing. I mean, that's a big one that
9/11.
9/11. I mean, very, 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 very hard to access information that pierces the um, the uh, the accepted narratives until you have the internet. I mean, think about how hard it would have been. It was to
Oh
research like
yeah.
the Kennedy assassination before you could just hop on the internet. I mean, you would have had to have. I mean, I remember as a kid being fascinated by the Oliver Stone movie that came out in '93 and thinking, wow, I mean, that's a really crazy story. I mean, it can't be true. I mean, I saw it in a theater and I always kind of, kept an interest in it. And then as the internet developed, it was sort of my one a little pet topic that I would go back to and read about, and I got books on it, and started to realize gradually over time that the Lee Harvey Oswald story wasn't a truthful story, to
Yeah,
say
how
the
would you
least.
even find out about these books though? The books that do talk about the
Right,
truth. It's like, who do you talk to? Because at least when I'm searching on the internet, I'm like, huh, I wonder if anyone else thought about the assassination or this thing or that thing.
right,
I'll type it in and I'll start to find. Now, granted, you have to dig a little bit, read a little bit to start narrowing, who's telling what, because there's disinformation about that too. But at least you start to find people that
right,
thought about it, wrote about it. But back, in the
right.
80s and 70s, you're not
No,
finding this
forget about it.
stuff. It's like, let alone, it's like, even VCRs were new, like
Right,
not everyone had a
right,
VCR. So it's not
right.
like, check out this show.
Right.
And then
You weren't gonna be able to access video. You weren't gonna be able to access, high quality photographs of events. You had the nightly news. That was your source of news. You had the newspaper, and that's really all you had. And there may have been dedicated, groups of researchers that would keep in touch with one another, but they were, we're talking about people that were far, far off the mainstream, and there's no way you would have been able to access those just sort of normally. I mean, you would have had to have made extraordinary efforts to even scratch the surface of those topics. And then what were you going to do, with your conclusions? I mean, nobody was going to believe you anyway. And, that was, but I mean, that's kind of the world we sort of grew up in. And I think that world was sort of, more or less, it may not have been stable behind the scenes, but I think it felt stable to a lot of people because there wasn't this world of sort of narratives and counter narratives and alternative, a for every event, a mainstream theory, and then an alternative theory, and then even a theory beyond that. I mean, you really didn't. I mean, we live in a world now where, I mean, I think it's, I mean, there are still people out there that are, live by sort of the old patterns. And I think, they flip on the TV for their news. I guess they may even still read a newspaper, although I don't know where you even get a newspaper these days, but maybe they look at, like, the New York Times on their phone, and that's they're satisfied with that information. But I don't see how anyone in the generations below us are ever going to continue that pattern or that sort of information complacency going forward. I mean, this is a world where people, they are still very much led. They are still very much um, uh, propagandized, but it's not like one central newscaster doing it. It's all these influencers in social media who are doing it, and they're doing it in different and competing ways, so that the society feels very much more in conflict and disagreement with itself. So it's a totally different feel than what we grew up with.
Yeah, I know when I grew up, like, I pretty much, it wasn't until about 2000 where I kind of thought both parties genuinely didn't like each other. But if they both agreed that, like, oh, we should go to war here, and I saw them both voting on the same war, I figured, well, that those people in that country must have actually did something bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until I stumbled across the video, and I think it was 2001, called the Bosnian Holocaust, or the Bosnian Genocide, by this guy named Jared Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And in it, and you probably remember this picture because it's a Time magazine photo, and it's got this guy, and he looks emancipated, and he's
Mm-hmm.
skinny, and it's got the headline, um, "Must this go on top of it. And it looks like this guy, and he's behind barbed wire. And it was during Bill Clinton's presidency. And I think it was like one photo that was like, yeah, let's get behind bombing Bosnia and Yugoslavia and get involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
And but when you look at that video, he shows this video of this camera crew and the woman who takes that picture, and they're actually the ones that are behind a barbed wire fence, and
Mm-hmm.
they're taking photo, and so the camera crew catches her, and she's taking a picture through the barbed wire fence, and you can see the other people. They're kind of like they're all different body types, and like they didn't all look like they were starving. It's only that one guy, and he goes, well, and one guy comes over and he's like, well, we all got different body types. Some built like me, and some built like him, and he points to the skinny guy, and but
Mm,
it's but
interesting.
and they were and I was like, wait a minute. And that's the thing that really struck me, because I was starting to come around to thinking this anyway. But when I came across that video, I was like, wait a minute. I remember being a little kid walking past that, or
Mm,
maybe a teenager, like 13, 15 years old. I can't remember how old I was. Walking past that in a store and thinking how horrible that was, and everyone going to war thinking, well, both sides agreed. That must have really went on. And I'm like, but they had to have the same information that guy had who showed that video,
mm-hmm.
and our government had to have that information. Our CIA had to have our information, the military, yet they still went to war over that, knowing this wasn't really going on.
Right.
And I felt like they pushed that on us. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and at that point, that's when I was like, wow, both sides are working together. That's all I can,
Hmm.
they got to be working together. There's got to
Right.
be one thing behind both sides. So
Yeah.
that's when I started. So in 2000, that's when I started looking, okay, how are all these connected? Because these guys actually look like they're all playing together, you know?
Right. Right. There's no actual adversarial process in government. Everything's been predetermined. But before the early 2000s, I mean, this is when you sort of I mean, it's the internet was still in its initial stages, early stages, but it's sort of the beginning of the information explosion. And part of what exploded was the ability to get a look behind the curtain and see how what you thought was the news is actually constructed, knowingly constructed, and then packaged to the people to justify decisions that have already been made and that we as citizens have no input into. I mean, that's the general structure of the government, right? I mean, it's a machine that has a certain agenda, and as far as our role in it, it's more like, I don't know. The best analogy I can think of is it's more like livestock than anything else. And I say that with all the love in the world for livestock. I mean, I've got sheep and goats, and I love them to death. But we are to the controllers, the oligarchs, what sheep and goats are to a farmer. Okay, which is the farmer is kind of responsible for them, feeds them, but is also, hey, if they've got to be culled, the sheep don't have any say in that, right? I mean, if they're going to be sold or chopped up for meat or have their, I mean, we don't have any say in that. We're the livestock, and it's kind of a depress. I mean, the depressing part of this is not, it's not the reality itself, because I think many governments have functioned like this throughout history. I don't think this is anything new. I think this sort of you know heavily oligarchic society in which you have sort of a population that is for the most part treated like chattel. I mean, you see a lot. You see it throughout sight. What the problem is that the country's propaganda machine also creates really strong expectations in people when it comes to their own individual rights and liberties. Right? I mean, and part of that is the fact that we have a constitution at the origin of our government that we still have, and it's really the only thing that binds us together as Americans, is sort of our collective faith in this political system that from an early age we are taught to revere as the best in the world. If we didn't have that, I hate to say it, but I don't think there would be a whole lot that binds Americans together as a cohesive unit, and that really troubles me because as things erode, and I think what we're experiencing here is a steady erosion of society. We're no longer in that sort of boomer era where things were easily hidden behind the curtain, and you know uh, we're in an era where it's out in the open. The Not just the narratives, but the counter narratives are accessible. and it creates an enormous amount of agitation in society, an enormous amount of fragmentation, an enormous amount of anger, an enormous amount of depression, an enormous amount of disgust and hatred for the government. And that's just going to keep boiling. I mean, it's going to keep boiling. I mean, do you see an end to that? I don't.
You see, the whole reason why I have people like you on my show and want to have more people like you on my show is because I just want to get out information and have people get, start to think about what we can do and accept how things are. And
Mm,
not just deny it, like, no, Trump's our hero, and just
mm.
deny everything he's done, or Bernie Sanders is our hero and deny everything he's done. Because I mean, I have issues with Bernie because I'm like, why wasn't Bernie ever? I don't recall. Now, I'm not this biggest Bernie Sanders follower. I lightly would listen to something or come across something, but it's like, it seems like I should have heard him say your name.
Oh yeah, no,
Did he?
no, no, never, 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 never. Well, what really got me pissed off was that not so much that Bernie Sanders like never acknowledged us, never. I mean, which is, I mean, it's so freaking weird when you think about it because, um, I mean, we're his supporters. I mean, we're going all out for the
The
cause.
biggest, I would
I mean,
actually
if
say, which
someone
is
was
fighting the hardest.
if somebody was doing that for me, I mean, I would be like embracing them with open arms and being like, thank God for people like you. I mean, you're my heroes for supporting me. But I mean, it was never in a million years would he deign to uh, uh, not just mention our name, but even imply that he had any connection to what we were doing. That's not what irritated me as much as when freaking Robert Kennedy got up and attributed our lawsuit to Bernie Sanders. Now that made me very, very angry because Robert Kennedy has to know better than that. And I'm not a huge Robert Kennedy fan, by the way. I think he's very much a wolf in sheep's clothing for a
So
lot of
how did he
reasons.
attribute your lawsuit to Bernie Sanders? Like, I don't
He
understand
said
that.
that Bernie Sanders sued the DNC
Oh my
for election
gosh.
rigging.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah. He said it was Bernie Sanders who did that. And I was thinking, I wasn't on Twitter. So, I mean, we're banned, so I wasn't able to respond to that. But that's just like a gut punch. It's like, yeah, we wish he was on board with our lawsuit, but just you really when that things like that happen, you realize how much of a two-tiered society we live in. I mean, if you're not like a Kennedy, if you're not a lifelong senator like Bernie Sanders, if you're not Donald Trump, you just exist in this, you're like a nothing. You might as well not exist in their eyes. You're mud. And that really irritates me because I mean it goes against every you know I mean every message I absorbed as a kid growing up in this country, which was that unlike other places, we take the idea of rights and freedoms seriously here. And yeah, I mean, my grandfather fought World War II against the Japanese, and he lied about his age to join the Air Force at the age of 17 because he was so intent on doing it. I mean, just I just can't imagine that kind of thing happening today. I think the military has a hard time even recruiting people, much less getting like people to like, you know, run to the military at the age of 17, wanting to like go headlong into battle. Okay, it's just we're in just a completely different era, but it's it's it we've been programmed in this certain way with certain expectations, with certain values, and then of course the reality for those of us who like you know have the wherewithal to do the hard digging, put the pieces together, come up with the real picture, you know, and the reality doesn't match that upbringing at any level, it's hard not to just fall into a complete um, I mean, I think there's like different ways of reacting to it. I mean, one is to just adopt the cognitive dissonance approach and say, like, look, I'm gonna stop going down these rabbit holes and just throw my lot in with Donald Trump. You know, I think that's what a lot of those people are doing, because you know that they're, you know, I mean, you know that a lot of them are by nature very suspicious of the government, and you know, very suspicious of authority figures. It's just when it comes to Donald Trump, he can do literally do no wrong.
Yeah, they flip that switch off. It's like that thinking switch goes off.
Yeah,
Or they don't
that's a good
want
way
to,
of
or they
putting
don't
it.
want to, or they don't want to accept that things are that bad.
Right, because the alternative, and I would get asked this question a lot, is like, well, so what's your answer? Okay, and I always kind of, I mean, I don't think that's the, I mean, I understand why people ask it. I don't know that that's the right way um, to phrase the question, or maybe the right question to ask, because first of all, it assumes that there's an answer for, like, it assumes that, like, we're, you know, we're like deserving of some sort of answer. I mean, I don't think that, I mean, I think what you're given as a human being is reality, and it's up to you to navigate it however you see fit. If the reality doesn't match what, you know, you were led to believe, or what you would prefer, I mean, you know, I mean, if you're hiking in a in let's say unfamiliar foreign terrain, and you have a map, right? And you realize as you, you know, halfway into your hike, that this map is not matching the terrain at all. I mean, do you go yell at the map and say, "Why are you so useless? You know, give me the right answer." No, you throw the map away, and you basically learn about the actual terrain that you're in. Okay. And you deal with it. And it may have nothing whatsoever to do with this map that you were handed before you started your hike. I mean, otherwise, you're just going to, you know, you're going to be wasting your time. And, you know, I mean, and I mean, I suppose you can sit in a corner and cry and pray for someone to save you, but probably um, the better course is to get busy drawing a new map based on the terrain as you know it.
I think it
um,
might be scary too for people to think that the world's under this much delusion and that people are actually this lost. And when you start to think you're like, you know, you're waking up and it's, and you start to see the world. I mean, I don't know if that's what's overwhelming to people, but I just kind of want people to see how messed up things actually are. So that way you don't just keep voting for Trump, Bernie Sanders, Nancy Pelosi, and all these other, you know, Mitt Romney, whatever you're voting for, you know, and start to wake up and then like go, oh, let me get involved, you know, or like for the Democrats, I feel like they're everything's so controlled with the super delegate system and how they run everything. You can't do anything with that part. You just got to pretty much stop supporting it. And with the Republican Party, I feel like if people would just get involved in the primaries, but what it is no one wants to get involved in the primaries until it's too late. And then they basically have their, you know, their picked you know, it looks like picked candidates to me that they
yeah,
already plan to get into
already planned.
positions. And so they already got the money flowing. They almost have like it looks like a blueprint that's like 20 years in advance.
Mm,
And here's this guy coming into office. And I just wish, because it's like me, I was going to run this past year, and I just
mm,
felt like running again, because basically I was going to run for a congressman position in the
mm.
Republican Party. But I felt like people were so stuck on Trump that for me to speak against him, no one would support me. And it was too much of a fight. And I was moving, and I had, you know, I have two kids, and I have a
Yeah, and
job
you're
where
gonna
I work
make
70
yourself
hours
a,
a week. And
and
I'm like,
let's be frank. You're gonna make yourself a target.
Yeah, that too. On
I
top of
mean,
that.
there's a lot of there, you know, there's a lot of people that are not dealing with these issues in a healthy or productive way. And I would say, I mean, I think you're right. I think if you want to be healthy and productive about it, you've got to start first with serious introspection, serious introspection. You and ultimately it comes down to like what you really want to get out of life and what's important to you. Okay. Um, I mean, my take on things is, you know, I have come to the belief that whether you're talking about the Democrats or Republicans, you're talking about a rigged process. Okay, it's rigged on both sides. They may do their rigging a little bit differently, but whoever's got control of the machines is determining the vote count, and they're determining the vote count based on the pre-selected candidate, and the candidates being pre-selected based on whatever narrative the deep state wants to propagate. And they're, you know, just like in, you know, a movie or a professional wrestling match or some other form of entertainment, you know, if you want to get the public to believe or support certain things, you want to have the right mouthpiece doing the talking to get them on board. So a guy like Trump, useful for certain things, um, you know, maybe Kamala Harris is useful for other things. Ultimately, those uses are going to determine who wins the election. Okay, election. Okay, it's not the number of votes. It's not, you know, people going into voting booths. It's which character do they want to put on stage based on the agenda they have over the next 4 years, which they've already uh, you know, written out. I mean, they already have that agenda. I mean, there's no deliberation on that agenda. That agenda is in place. I think a lot of it comes down to foreign policy. So if we're looking at the coming election, you've got Trump on one side. I think if the deep state wants to go in a certain direction with respect to Israel, then Trump is going to be the president. If it wants to go in another direction with respect to Israel, then Kamala Harris is going to be the president. And I think the other factor is Russia is the war in Ukraine. So I think personally, my view is that the narrative seems to be telling us that Trump is going to be the president because I think just as a basic geopolitical matter, I think the U.S. has to wind down the war in Ukraine. I mean, it's lost. Okay, it's not gonna. There's no winning that war. I mean, it was a lost war from the beginning, but you're not going to beat Russia in a war over the Ukraine. Not going to happen. Everybody who knows history knows that. Okay, so that was just basically you know, a massive dump of like money and I guess some of our old weapons onto the Ukrainians. We cleared out our, you know, outdated, you know, munitions and machinery and whatever, and we dumped it in the Ukraine. You know, there's really probably not a lot left to give. The war's run its course. And I mean, you're seeing, you know, signs of that in sort of the chatter in the Russian media and even in the Western media. So Trump is a much better positioned as president to sort of be the American figure that winds that down. Not so with Kamala Harris and the Democrats. I think they're much more embedded with the whole Ukrainian grift, and they would rather keep that going for as long as possible. On the flip side, when it comes to Israel, that's where, you know, things get interesting with Trump because I mean, I see Trump as being the candidate who's going to give the Israelis as much latitude to do whatever they want in the multiple wars that they're fighting right now. I think he proved that in his first term. And what were the major things he did? Right, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I mean, he was enormously popular in Israel. He, Israel is not about to wind down that war. That war's only just gotten off the ground. So, from the Israeli perspective, they would rather have Trump as the president because he'll basically give a blank check. And where's their opposition to Israel of the two parties? It's all in the Democratic Party. There's no opposition to Israel in the Republican Party. So all signs to me, for those reasons, point to a Trump victory this time around. I don't know what your thoughts are on
No, I
that.
was curious about that because I couldn't make up my mind because I'm like, because the thing that's kind of stunned me a little bit since 2008 was the amount of work they put into just creating the loser of the election. Because I
Mm,
honestly pick I thought this happened, in 2012 with Ron Paul and Romney. I'm like, wow, you guys put in a lot of work, and I know you guys want Romney to lose, but you're sure putting in a lot of work even to set up a loser. Because at first I thought maybe they want Romney to win because I see all this work they're putting behind him.
mm,
And then when I see him lose, I'm like, wow, they put so much effort into
yeah.
making a loser and making sure he lost.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
if
I
Ron
think
Paul,
it.
he would have been a
Yeah.
challenge.
No, I just wanted to say I think you hit on something very important, which is that it probably takes as much effort to create a winner as it takes to create a loser. I mean, it's you can't. I mean, you're manipulating a population of of let's just call them voters or whatever you want to call them, but you're manipulating them. Um, uh, sort of almost like it's almost like an orchestral performance, but you need to keep like sort of a balance going. I mean, if things get too out of whack, you run the risks associated with an imbalance. I mean, it's a delicate. So you really need to keep, the Reds and the Blues both believing that their candidate has a bona fide chance. Otherwise, you really run the risk of, I think, the system seizing up. I don't think that this country could survive as a one party system.
See,
Which
basically, when you did your lawsuit, it looked to me like they basically told you flat out that's how things run in the Democrat Party. Like they just want to create the illusion
yeah,
of a fair election or a fair primary. And
right.
but
No, they were very candid about it. I mean, it's
I mean,
remarkable. And I got to say, to this day, I mean, I have no animosity or ill feelings at all towards the lawyers for the Democratic Party who we fought against. I mean, they were. I mean, we had some scary things happen in the lawsuit that was, didn't have anything to do with the lawyers. I mean, it had to do with witnesses, dropping like flies. But as
Sean
far as
Lucas.
yeah, but the lawyers for the other side, I mean, they were remarkably candid in court with their position. I mean, it actually took my breath away when I was sitting in court and I heard them just stating it straight up. There's no we have no obligation to run a fair primary. I mean, if we want to go into the back room, smoke cigars, and pick candidates that way, that is our right. I had never heard that line before, and this was coming straight out of the Democratic Party attorney's mouth. And I give him a lot of credit for just laying it out on the table. I mean, it did. I think what's more frustrating for me is when they really try to hide the ball and treat you like you're a freaking ignoramus, and like you can't see what's going on. And there's a lot of that goes on, and you see a lot of it, at sort of, I mean, we were in federal court, our, you know, litigation dialogue was at a very high level. So that's sort of the typical gaslighting tactics where you basically, um, you know, treat your opponent like a complete moron and a child, and you know, you know, not worthy of any attention or consideration. It's not going to work in federal court. I mean, and the judge may have a very bad reaction to it. So in a way that, I mean, and that's one of the sort of mm, the the good points of our what's left of our legal system is actually we still have an ability, although it's vanishing very rapidly, to bring people into court and hold them to some level of accountability. In this case, we didn't get a positive judgment, but at least we got on the record statements in court about the Democratic Party's beliefs about what it's allowed to do, and that's really invaluable, and it gave me a lot of clarity on the situation. So I don't feel like I'm walking around in the darkness now with respect to that issue. I mean, for me, the issue's been resolved. That's how things work. Okay, so let's take it to the next level. Knowing that, what do we do as sort of these disenfranchised citizens who don't have real elections to express our political preferences, and we're shut out of the decision-making process? What should we be doing? And that's really the huge question that everyone wants answered. And I think I said before, I would always get these questions from people. Well, what's your solution to the problem? As if as if reality is a problem that always has a solution. No, I mean, sometimes reality is just reality and it doesn't match up with what you were led to believe. That doesn't mean that you have to have like a terrible life and, go, throw yourself off a cliff. I mean, what that means is that you've got to do some serious introspection about what you want to get out of your life on this earth, because, um, you know, what you were told doesn't match up with the reality. Okay, I mean, there's only so much you can cry about that, right? I mean, other people are moving on, have faced, difficult situations, enormously difficult political situations, much more difficult than ours. And they've, managed to have very fulfilling lives, and they've even, managed to help change their societies for the better. I mean, that has happened throughout history. Why doesn't that apply here? But I don't think voting. I don't think telling people to go to the polls, pay attention to politics, become an informed voter. That's all nonsense. That's all got to go out the window. I think the first step has to be, and this is where a lot of people don't like what I have to say. It's probably why I'm banned on Twitter. But I think the first step has to be disengagement from the political process. Stop feeding it. Okay, it's a monster. Okay, I mean, I know that we've been told that this is our pathway to being a self-governing society with a constitutional tradition and a glorious republic that people fought for. I know that, but I mean, when something is rotten, you gotta disengage, because if you keep feeding it, it's gonna stick around. Okay,
Well,
so
that's kind of what I see when I see people watching these shows about Trump and all this stuff. They'll have pro-Trump shows or
mhm.
pro Kamala shows. I don't even know if I know of a pro Kamala show, but like a pro Bernie show or something like that. And it's like, when I think about, I wouldn't say they have to pull from the political process, but you have to pull from that. You can't feed that, because when you keep feeding that,
Right.
I think that lets them know, yep, you're still stupid. we can just keep going.
Exactly.
You're feeding
Right.
that, you're encouraging that, you're
Right.
giving them money and energy.
Right. Well, and that I think I like the way you put it better. It's not so much a disengagement from the political process, but maybe it's a redefining of what the political process is. And yeah, it's not going into these, so-called voting booths and pushing buttons and, giving, I mean, people giving money to these people. I mean, who in their right mind is like cutting checks to Donald Trump? I mean, you have got to be like okay, put a bumper sticker on your car if it makes you feel better. I mean, put a yard sign up, but giving the guy money? Really? I mean, that's what really gets me is because, I know that people feel that they're doing the right thing and they're trying to do the, in the script that they've been provided and that they're holding dear to. This is how you are a good citizen in the United States, right? You engage in the political process, you vote, and of course, given the direction of our Supreme Court, really, it's not so much voting, but it's the giving of money to candidates that they really want. But really, I mean, that's really, I mean, once once the once the political industry is no longer profitable for its participants, that's when things might actually start to crack and bend a little bit. Okay, but as long as we keep funneling money into it, and funneling attention to it, and supporting this politics industry, we're going to be stuck with it. And that's not positive. That's not addressing the situation in any positive way. That's just keeping a bad situation going and allowing it to become even worse and more rotten. So, you know, how you approach political engagement without falling into those traps. I mean, I think, number one, I really do think that, and this has been a long time coming in this country, but I think part of what needs to happen in people's consciousness is to really start to understand the place of this country vis-a-vis the rest of the world, and to really get a handle on geopolitical events, because ultimately what's going to change this society, what's going to bend this society, what's going to transform into something else is going to be hard, cold geopolitical realities that even all the wealth and military might of the United States can't withstand. And we see it happening. But it's to become, I think need to become way more literate and way more tuned in as to what is happening in other parts of the world that are a direct consequence of this country's eroding hegemony, as I would say, because our hegemony is very much eroding. It's not something that uh, any empire has ever been able to put a stop to, is its own collapse. I mean, it's just the rule of history, and we're living in that time. So that's an interesting question I see on the screen
Yeah, I
there.
wanted to go back to it because she said it earlier,
Yeah.
and my whole thing about that is because she said, and I'll just for people that might be driving, this crystals and paint says, "Do you think they'll eventually take the internet down so we cannot find any information that's not laced with propaganda?" And right now, my problem with um, I don't think they need to do that because I don't think people can discern. I think
Mm.
people's discernment is actually pretty bad when here it is 4 years later and we're still voting for Trump. I mean, I think that's a huge issue. I think that's a
Yeah.
huge issue when, like, how in the world does Kamala and Biden? I mean, really, is Kamala and Biden really the best the Democrats can do? I mean, people guys kind of stop and think about that for a second, and I don't know what
Well,
you want to say.
that's a great question because I think they are the best they can do because I think ever since my theory on that is that ever since the Kennedy assassination and the other assassinations in the 60s, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, I don't think the Democratic Party has been able to um, like um, attract and maintain um, bona fide leaders. It's just too risky.
I
I
don't even
mean,
think the people who control it want bona fide
no,
leaders.
they don't, and so, but I think the point is that um, the people that have the question is like, so is the best they can do like these god awful like Biden, Kamala Harris people that are so detestable. Like I don't think like people who actually can register on the likability scale at any level like are attracted to politics. I mean, I just think it's you have to be like a demonic person to to go down that path. I mean, Obama was probably their best hit in terms of and Bill Clinton too, in terms of like a snake charmer or a shape shifting personality that had talent um, you know uh, and charisma. I think the issue is really charisma. Why such a lack of charisma in the Democratic Party so recently? I mean, everyone from Hillary Clinton to Kamala Harris to Joe Biden. I mean, no charisma with these people whatsoever. I mean, you say what you want about Trump, but I mean, the man has charisma. Okay. I mean, people get energized by the guy. People like him. That's why they keep getting caught in that same pattern of cognitive dissonance because it's hard to let him go once you've developed like an emotional attachment. But you don't see that on the Democratic side anymore, and I think it's because like democratically inclined people that would otherwise go into politics avoid it like the plague because it's a death sentence if you end up making the wrong move. I mean, you're gone like that. I mean, they'll shoot you in the head, in an open limousine. So, the Republicans have managed to somehow avoid that. Although, don't forget the assassination attempt on Reagan in shortly after he was took office in '81, right? I mean, by John Hinckley, a friend of the Bush family. Um, interesting story there. But why is it that Reagan was almost assassinated? Well, look at the charisma the guy had. Okay, off the charts. Okay, so but sort of that question I do think that we are certainly at risk for more disruptive events going forward that could involve things like the internet going out for a while, just because it would be sort of like a COVID type op. I mean, COVID was an extremely disruptive and alarming op that I still don't think people have absorbed. I mean, you still have people like shooting themselves up with the Moderna vaccine. Okay. I mean, I know of one guy that, he just got his like seventh Moderna vax. Okay. And he's like, and he even, he announced it um, by saying, hey, I'm still alive. I mean, imagine that, you have some awareness that this thing is potentially deadly and yet you're still jabbing yourself with it. I mean, think about the psychology of that, you know?
It's mind blowing to
That's a
me.
suicide cult.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
and the thing is, Trump, even during the 2015 primary, and a lot of people probably forget this, he's debating that Ben Carson,
Yeah, Ben Carson, sure.
and they asked the panel about vaccines, and Trump goes, I'd like to have vaccines, but over a longer period of time. And I'm like, that's multiple, but I'd like to have multiple doses over a longer period of time. And no candidate had ever said that. We never saw a vaccine like that. And then Trump gets elected and he gives us a vaccine like that. I think that's pretty weird, And a lot of people kind of seem to miss that. And I got these clips if anyone's curious.
This is Trump debating Carson.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could play it right now and let you see it real quick.
Yeah, I don't think I caught
30 seconds. Because it's not a very long clip at all. Here, let me.
Experts.
Hold on, let me share the screen. Or maybe it is already up here. Oh, here we go. Here.
Still encourage getting a third shot with the current mRNA vaccine.
The main benefit is just from boosting. So boosting jacks up the antibodies, which...
Okay, so I just put this clip at the beginning because I wanted people to, hear the storyline, and then so
this is 2015, like 5 years before COVID.
Right. So this is basically when he's backstabbing. That part was where he's backstabbing people over the measles. Here, I'll just go ahead and play this part because what this is after he becomes president. So this isn't the part I'm talking about right here, but it's still kind of curious.
Toronto.
This is really going around now. They have to get their shot. I am totally in favor of vaccines, but I want smaller doses over a longer period of time.
Experts.
See.
And that was
okay. So that part where you see him with Ben Carson, that is 2015 Republican primary.
Wow. So they're talking about childhood vaccines.
Or any vaccine. Totally in favor of vaccines, but I want smaller doses over a longer period of time.
Okay. Right. So,
I just think that's really odd. Like that's like one of the strangest things that no one points out, that he's like, we never had a candidate say that, and here he goes saying that, and we got this COVID vaccine. People don't know that he's also signed the Vaccine Modernization Act, and I can't remember if it was October or November of 2019, right? And so so it looks like he set this up. He even talked to Bill Gates in 2017. He had a meeting with him about a universal flu vaccine, and there was like an article about it, and so it's just kind of like,
right,
you could see this coming.
Well, I mean, in retrospect, if it, I mean, obviously COVID was an operation that was long planned, so one of the whole points of the Trump presidency may have been to get as much of the country on board with vaccines as possible, because if it had been a Democrat pushing them at that time, I mean, it's quite possible that the entire red population would have opted out of vaccines, right? Just on the principle that a Democrat was behind them.
Yeah, see, that's the thing too. Is like, I think they wanted to make sure they couldn't have Bernie Sanders run against Trump, because had he run against Trump and had the elections looked close at all, he might have had riots. I don't think they wanted riots over that. He might have actually won if they actually don't even, fix the elections. Bernie might have actually won that election, which I think there's a good chance. If elections aren't fixed, he might have won that election. Yeah. And then they could have never done COVID, right?
Right. That's exactly right. And this is why
have Hillary win.
Right. No, that's I don't know that they could have had Hillary win.
Well, not the election, but they had to have her win the primary.
Right.
Lose to Trump,
but not the general. Not the general. Because
no.
Half of the population would not have been on board with the vaccine. The
Oh,
only
and they would have
president,
fought it hard.
right,
They would have been like, something's going on,
right,
and they would have been out protesting it every single day, bringing awareness. With Trump, you didn't have people going,
right.
well, wait a minute, why is Trump doing this? Trump, you don't have to renew that emergency order every 90 days. If you just don't renew it, this goes away. And here's Trump renewing it every
Right.
90 days, right?
Well, the interesting thing is so really they it was sort of a two puppet operation. I mean,
Yes.
I don't think Democrats were listening to Trump so much as Fauci when they took their vaccine, right? I mean,
Right,
they
right.
rolled out Fauci as sort of the face for the Democrats and Trump as the face for the Republicans, and thereby maximized the uptake of the vaccines between the two of them. Whereas if you tried to do it with just a Democrat and Fauci, you're not going to have anybody get it who's even close to getting the Republicans on board. So that actually, so if I'm right about Trump looking like he's going to be the winner, and we may expect another COVID-like event over the next 4 years, because it'll give them the opportunity to do something like that again. So it could be real scary. But that's a really interesting clip. I'm glad you played that. Oh, can I ask you a question, Chris?
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I was really excited to see the. I'm sorry if you can hear my
No,
kids in the background, but I don't know what the heck they're doing out there. But they're like they're it's like like an 11-year-old, 13-year-old daughters, and they're just like
Right. I
it
know
gets
how
very
it can
loud.
be.
It gets loud, how but I was interested in the thrust of your show is on you say it's a Protestant show, and I think that's really interesting, because I personally I don't consider myself to be a religious person, but I do like to think of myself as religiously literate and literate when it comes to scripture, because I think and this is sort of part of what I've been digging into the last few years. I really do think you know there's a lot going on in sort of biblical terms that dovetails with the geopolitical situation. And a lot of people are missing it because, we don't have sort of a religiously literate country anymore. I mean, we used to be a very
And I
religious
agree with that.
country, and we used to have people that were very much tuned into people had a great understanding of the Bible. You don't really have that anymore in this country. I mean, I don't know really what the numbers are in terms of people that actually go to houses of worship. But that aside, I mean, I think it's very difficult to encounter people that actually know what the Bible says and what's in it. And this is bad, because no matter what you think of religion, the fact of the matter remains that it is still, in terms of the world's major religions, those are still the most important narratives driving human beings. So if you want to understand politics and what's motivating human action on the broader stage, you really have to understand what's in the Bible. I mean, I believe that, and not as not from a Christian point of view, as you would have, but actually from more of a political analytic view, because you really and this is especially true with respect to the events that are going on in Israel right now. And I don't know what your take on all this is, or whether you think this is all hokum, but to really understand Israel and the conflicts that are going on there, you have to be able to put it into a biblical context, or else you're not going to understand things.
Well, part of the problem is that I think the because this is why my show's also got very few views, because I make people angry mentioning this, but I think a lot of people have the wrong view about Bible prophecy, because there's some prophecy in the Bible, I believe it's been fulfilled, but they'll take this one prophecy about this coming Messiah, which, most people would say it's Jesus. And, if you're Christian at least, but they'll take this prophecy in Daniel chapter 9, and they'll throw this 70th week into the future and say it's about an antichrist. Now, when I read that verse, it looks like it's about Jesus Christ, but somehow back in around the 1600s, during the Protestant Reformation, these Jesuits popularize something because they wanted to take the eyes off the Pope being called the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
They said, they brought up this other interpretation and slowly got that popularized. And now today, almost like I'd say you go into 90% of your churches and they're teaching, this 70th week is about this Antichrist that's going to make a 7-year deal with Israel.
Right.
And so now you got all this focus on Israel. So now it's like, well, we expect these Jews that forsook Messiah to have this false Messiah that's going to fool them and fool the rest of the world. And then they'll twist other verses, say like, oh, well, if you bless Israel, those that bless Israel, God will bless you back, and all this stuff.
So it's really interesting to me. I want to, if you don't mind talking about this a little further.
I don't mind talking about it at all, because I think it's a big issue.
I'm really trying to further my own understanding, and just to give you a sense of my background. I mean, I'm Jewish, but I had a bar mitzvah, but I haven't been really a practicing Jew since my bar mitzvah at the age of 13. My wife is Catholic, and I've always had, even when I was in school, I always had kind of an interest in Catholic theology and whatnot. Interest in my interests were far wider than just sort of the Jewish tradition I was brought up with. So when it comes to sort of the Protestant understanding of things like revelations and what those prophecies mean, I'm sort of working in the dark and without a real background. But trying to piece it together, and I appreciate if you could help me out here and tell me where I may be going wrong.
Show takes a diverse turn. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I bet you weren't expecting that, but it's actually,
I didn't know. Well, I like
this stuff's been on my mind. It's been on my mind for a while, and I'm glad we're having the opportunity to talk about it.
I love talking about it, so I'm really glad you want to even talk about it. I just wasn't going to force it into the conversation.
No, I mean, it's well, I think some of these facts need to be put in front of people to get discussions going, because let me just put a couple thoughts out there. So there seems to be what's going on in Israel right now. My take on things is that there is a what's sort of motivating a lot of the Israeli actions, the aggressive Israeli actions that we're seeing, comes down to the Temple Mount, and the fact that you have what I would call this union of Messianic Jews and I guess Messianic Christians that have sort of reached sort of an understanding with each other, and are both like actively working to sort of bring about the same thing. And they're really focused on the Temple Mount right now, because they want to rebuild the temple, right? Because on their interpretation of Revelations, the Antichrist can't come until the third temple is constructed.
Right.
Have I got that right?
Yeah. So basically, they're taking the last verse in Daniel chapter 9. They're throwing it at least 2,000 years into the future. It's like, to me, it's kind of weird because it's a prophecy that should have concluded after 490 years.
Okay.
But for some reason, because it's sectioned up and it's telling you what's going to happen in the first part of the section, what's going to happen in the middle part, and what's going to happen in the last, they go, okay, maybe that means it can be, 3 different events, and it can happen over a course of 3,000 years or something, and be fulfilled, and it shouldn't be read like that.
Okay, so
okay. Yeah, so what they want to do is they want to throw the 70th week of Daniel, which is the final 7 years of Daniel, into the future, and they were going to say, and they read this verse in Daniel chapter 9, which says, and he shall make a covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause sacrifice and oblation to cease, which means sacrifice and offering to cease. Well, it sounds like Christ, when he got sacrificed on the cross, he's the one who did that. But somehow these people twisted in their minds, and they're saying, no, that means the Antichrist is going to break a peace treaty. I don't.
Right. So your view is that what these folks perceive as prophecy is actually history.
Right. Like it's like Jesus already fulfilled it, but they're rewriting it the other way. And if
so Jesus is not coming back on you.
No, Jesus is coming back, but I'm talking about that prophecy was about his first coming.
Oh,
and they're trying to make it about an Antichrist instead. Yeah, I mean, see now in Revelation,
and who was the Antichrist in the first coming?
Well, I don't think I mean, anyone that opposes Christ would have been an Antichrist, or someone that tries to sit in Christ's place. You don't claim that, oh no, I'm really the one that's fulfilling it.
So it could have been the Romans, basically.
Well, any kind of false teacher, basically they would say to have the spirit of the Antichrist, because it says anyone that denies Jesus is the Son of God is Antichrist. Basically, that's what the Bible basically tells you what the Antichrist is. But then, like, people think that there's this son of perdition, and they go, that is the Antichrist, right? And so, and they speculate all these different people. Was Trump the son of perdition? Was Obama and that guy the son of perdition? And Matthew, or I think it is, or maybe it's Thessalonians, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But one of those, they'll go, that's also another title of the Antichrist. And then it's like in Revelation, they'll tie all that in together in this really weird way that shouldn't be married together, in my opinion.
So you think that there's some real textual errors that are being made in these interpretations?
Oh, these are just horrible errors, because to me, some of this just comes down to, if you just knew how the Jewish calendar worked and knew the basic dates certain historical events happen, like, no Christian, I don't think, in their right mind would believe this. That's why I try to debate this stuff with people, because I'm like, I want to see you actually debate me on this and be able to show this to an audience, because I think I can show how ridiculous this is. And part of that is because I do want to end things like this weird support for Israel, at least in this weird way. I mean, it's because this isn't, like, to me, a healthy way. If you're thinking, well, there's definitely going to be a third temple, and I can see how someone can read Revelation and maybe think there's a third temple.
So you think it wasn't the third temple, it's the second temple. That's referred to.
Yeah, I think most of that stuff's referred to either the second temple, or in Revelation it could be referred to as a spiritual temple, not a temple made of hands, but of flesh,
Okay, and which I mean, in terms of theologians or pastors, I mean, who in your view gets it right?
Oh gosh, man, I'm gonna be honest
or
with
as
you.
close to right as possible. I mean
I think
historic. I
a
mean,
lot.
yeah.
I
No, go
think a
ahead.
lot of
Sorry.
people are just I think a lot of no, you're totally fine. I think a lot of people, man, like 99% of Christianity is like they're off. I mean,
Right.
it's just real off. It's the same as going, well, who do you think's right in politics? Has it right about politics?
Right.
Could you name a person? I couldn't.
Right. But let's go back to the beginning of the Reformation, though. I mean, are there any figures, in sort of the Reformation in its purest form
I
who?
have a very harsh view of the Reformation
Oh,
that
okay.
people
Oh,
won't
that's
like either
interesting.
because, because
So
you'll hear
yeah,
the popular ones like Martin Luther and
right.
John Calvin and
John
people like
Calvin.
that. But it's like, John Calvin did some horrible things. Luther, I think he was a rabid anti-Semite, and I
Hmm.
think that caused him. Okay, look, personally, I think we should still be keeping the Sabbath. Like when I read the Bible, I don't see Jesus getting rid of the Sabbath. Yeah,
Okay.
and to me, it seems
Right.
crazy that here's this Jewish religion keeps Sabbath, keeps all the 10 Commandments, and I don't see one single word in the Bible about changing it from Sabbath to Sunday, and yet all of a sudden, Jerusalem gets destroyed in 70 AD, and all we're doing is listening to founding fathers who are, not Jewish. And
Hmm.
so I'm like, are we really getting the true Christianity, or was it suppressed in favor of something that would go better with the Roman religions that were
Right.
popular at the time? Because it's a lot easier to synchronize Christianity if it's keeping Sunday, if
Yeah.
these people are what do you call it, where they'll compromise, right? Like, oh well, we don't want to look Jewish, but we're willing to compromise. Okay, well, those, maybe if they're willing to compromise a little bit, there we can mold this Christianity to fit our Mithraism and then kind of combine them into one religion, and
Hang on, I'm just going to tell my kids to be
oh
quiet because
sure.
I want to be able to follow what you're saying. So I'm just going to be 1 second and
All right.
hold on. Sorry about this.
Oh no, you're totally fine. So yes, everyone, I guess this is taking a turn. So, so I don't know. I don't want to keep silence though. Maybe I could play something. You know what? Here, I'll play this while we're waiting for him because
Risk to New Yorkers for coronavirus is low, and our city prepared.
let me give you, in case people haven't seen this yet. This, look up there, February 2nd. So Donald Trump's already making a vaccine. So Donald Trump is already starting a vaccine on January 13th. And here's February 2nd. And what's happening? These are Democrats from the months of February to March, all the way up to like maybe a couple of days before Trump locked us down. Listen to what these Democrats are saying. Does this sound like the Democrats are pressuring Donald Trump to make the vaccine? And that's all I want you to listen to as you hear this.
The risk to New Yorkers for coronavirus is low, and our city preparedness is high.
This should not stop you from going about your life, should not stop you from going to Chinatown and going out to eat. I'm going to do that today myself.
Come to Chinatown. Here we are. We're, again, careful, safe, and come join us.
There is no concern at this time for coronavirus in our region.
The Department of Sanitation is ready for Mardi Gras 2020.
The facts are reassuring.
We want New Yorkers to go about their daily lives.
There's really no need to panic and to avoid activities that we always do as New Yorkers. We are a hardy people.
Americans do not need to panic. What I would suggest, however, is that Americans take this as a wake-up call for seasonal flu.
There's very little threat here. This disease, even if you were to get it, basically acts like a common cold or flu.
So we're telling New Yorkers, go about your lives, take the subway, go out, enjoy life, and certainly not to miss the parade next Sunday. I'm going to be there.
If you had to, would you close down the borders?
No.
We need to be honest about the American people, with the American people, about the fact that we can't keep people coming here from China.
And transmission is not that easy. I think there's been a misperception that coronavirus hangs in the air waiting to catch you. No, it takes direct person-to-person contact.
We also know that if it were likely to be transmitted casually, we would be seeing a lot more cases.
Right, because this is New York and you're in elevators and trains.
Yeah, you can't find this clip anymore. They took it down off the internet.
That's it. I mean, that's really, really telling.
With everybody all the time.
And it's basically you're preserving a historical document which is going to be studied in the future when people sort all this out, and what a mess we've made of our society here. It's incredible when you think about it. I hope we didn't scare too many people away with my deviation into the talk about the New Testament. But the reason I bring that up is because whether you think people are wrong in their interpretation or whether you agree with their interpretation, people are moved to action by the interpretations that they subscribe to. And in the case of the Messianic Jews in Israel, who, let's face it, they're running the show there now. Okay. Who's in power in Israel, right? Netanyahu. Okay. But who is keeping him in power? Okay. It's the far right, and it's the Messianic Jews. Okay. And I am convinced that they see this as their opportunity to seize the Temple Mount. And I say that because, are you familiar with the 6 red heifers and the efforts to breed the heifers that have been made? And that were transported from Texas to Jerusalem fairly recently.
Well, not recently, but man, it seems like ever since I was a little kid, I'd be watching 700 Club with my grandmother.
Yeah,
and she'd have it on, and I'd hear them saying, "Oh, we found a red heifer," and
apparently they actually have
hearing it, because I've been.
But they actually there's supposedly there's this. Okay, there's this foundation. I think it's called the Temple Foundation. They put in serious resources into genetically engineering red heifers, the perfect red heifers, so that they can perform the rituals to sanctify the temple. And they've been raising the priests that who are required to be raised in a certain way to perform the rituals. Okay. This is like really going on. It's not just like fantasy and hope that we find a red heifer. It's like, no, we have the red heifers. We've brought them to Israel. Okay. The priests, by the way, this is fascinating to me, but the priests have to be raised in the side of a cliff because, according to their interpretation, a ritually pure priest can never have tread on a grave, right? And that includes, graves that you don't know are graves. So you actually have to be raised like in the side of a mountain. Okay. And these children they've reached the age of maturity, but they were raised in the side of a mountain. Yeah. See, I'm not making it up, Bob. We're talking about, real red heifers. And my understanding is that they've actually, performed some of the rituals already, and they have the temple already constructed. Okay. It's in pieces. It's a modular construction. So they just have to put the pieces together when they finally have the mount. Okay. So they're close. Okay. And they genuinely believe, and, I don't I mean, whatever you want to say about their interpretation, they believe it, and they want to play a role in the end of days, basically, as they see Revelation playing out. So, I mean, to me, like, this is sort of the part that people kind of miss when they look at the Israel situation, because I agree with you. We're talking about unhealthy is probably too mild of a word to describe the relationship between the US and Israel. And I say that, by the way, just to make sure, full disclosure. I mean, my, family, going back to my first cousin 4 times removed, played a fairly large role in the creation of the state of Israel. I've never been there, never been to the country. Obviously, I have a lot of family that are over there that I've never seen. My first cousin 4 times removed was the first chief rabbi of the city of Jerusalem in the state of Israel. Okay. So that's sort of my background. I don't come from any point of like animosity to the state of Israel, but I think in terms of the country's political development, what we have, I mean, as badly as U.S. society has developed over the years, I mean, Israel's society has developed in deeply, deeply concerning ways, to the point where it's now controlled by people that are, they don't just believe in this interpretation of Revelations. They see themselves as enacting this interpretation of Revelations. It's an active project, okay? And I am convinced that they are pushing hard in Gaza right now, pushing hard, wherever they can push hard, because ultimately what they want is they want to push the Palestinians off the Temple Mount, because they want to build the temple, okay? And I mean, it sounds like a crazy idea that will never happen, but if you think about it, I mean, they can amp this conflict up as much as they amp it, and in whatever negotiation process, as long as they get the Temple Mount, they may not give a shit. Or sorry for my language, I forgot where I was for a moment, but I get a little worked up over this. Okay, I mean, they're not gonna care if they have to make concessions on another front, to, as long as they get the Temple Mount, because that's the real prize here. And they need to batter the Muslims as much as possible, in their view, in order to put them in a position where they can actually occupy and take the Temple Mount. And maybe by force. I mean, we're already seeing them, doing, prayers there, which, for the longest time, the code was, that Jews could not pray on the Temple Mount. Okay. But they're changing that. So they are physically moving in. They are occupying the Temple Mount. And, I mean, that to me is the really concerning thing, because if they can manufacture red heifers, if they can build the temple, if they can take the Temple Mount, then they can also create the antichrist, or whatever they want to stand in for the antichrist, and they can create their Messiah.
Well, see, that's the thing too, right there. You see, that's one view I have also, is that create the Antichrist. Not that it will be the real Antichrist, but create it, or create a scenario. See, I can't understand, like, are they actually gonna just, okay, and there's 3 options. I could be wrong, right? And maybe this is all organic, and I'm just wrong. And then the second option is, are they just using this prophecy and using people's motions to manipulate them? But they have no, like, it's not like they're actually going to bring this prophecy to pass, or at least their interpretation of the prophecy.
Right.
But they're just using it to get us involved in their get control the Muslims, get
Right.
all the Christians worked up. Oh yeah, we need to go to war. This is
Right.
going to be it. This is going to be it. And then 7 years later they do
It-
this again, and and keep doing it.
Or it may be 7 years later, or it may usher in a long reign of hundreds and hundreds of years, until something else comes along. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the ability to use religious texts as political tools is, I mean, this goes back, as long as there've been religious texts. And
Yeah.
that's why I think people need to be literate in religious texts, because you will not understand the larger events in politics, especially geopolitics, if you do not understand, number one, what the Bible says, and number two, how people are using what the words are to, as you say, advance agendas that basically, when it comes down to it, it's the aggrandizement of power for themselves, right? I mean, they're not truly interested in a Messiah. What they want to do is they want to appoint the Messiah.
Yeah, I mean, see, and I'm not sure like what their whole goal is, because I know like most of the okay, so you got like maybe 1 billion Catholics, maybe almost 1 billion of various other Christians. So you almost have like 2 billion people of the world's population that believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So it's not like they're gonna really accept it if you have a Messiah, unless you either have a like a version of Jesus that they think is coming the second time.
Mm-hmm.
That might fool some of them. Maybe you have this antichrist figure, because a lot of them would believe in like, oh, well, here's an antichrist figure. So I don't know how they're gonna like. I don't know if they're using this to manipulate people, or if they're just using this to just like they never intend to bring this prophecy to pass, in a non-organic way where they just manufacture this whole thing, like manufacture an antichrist. Maybe they just want to keep using it as an excuse to just go into Israel, bomb the Muslims, bomb over here, protect. Let's do this for Israel, And
well, hey, if Israel, look, Israel is kind of a unique state because it sort of, it doesn't wait around. Okay, it acts, and it acts aggressively in ways that you don't see other states do. So from the Israeli perspective, let's say Israel's looking ahead to what we may call the New World Order, the post-American order, okay, the post-American hegemony order, okay. And it says, you know what? I actually think our prospects are pretty good in a world where America is no longer ascendant, even though we profited greatly by being, hand in glove with them, since our inception. Okay. But we have to play our cards right. Okay. What do we have to do? Right. Well, I mean, first of all, a certain reading of Revelations is tailor-made for Israel, because they say it describes a conflict between the Romans and their allies and the Jews, right? Everyone gangs up on the Jews. I mean, isn't that sort of how
yeah,
Revelation
because a
goes?
lot of people think that there's some people that paint a scenario of like the whole world's about ready to surround Israel and God saves them, and like some end times event. There's a lot of various interpretations that go
Right.
on because
But the one I think the one that's driving these people behind the red heifers is one that involves the world going to war with the Jews, and most of the world following the Antichrist in that cosmic battle. Right?
I would say that that's probably what drives people to support Israel. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
But in terms of the very loud messianic Christian population that is, promoting itself,
And I think a lot of the some of a lot of the Christians that teach this also teach that whatever Jews that are on earth are suddenly going to recognize Messiah.
Well,
And
here's the interesting thing. I mean, whether you believe it's a second coming of Jesus or whether you believe it's the first coming of the Messiah, okay, I mean, those are compatible beliefs. So this group
that's
believes
true too.
this guy was here before. This group says he wasn't here before. Who really cares about that? We're talking about the present. We both agree he's the Messiah.
Yeah,
The Jews don't need to come around, at least the Messianic Jews. And the interesting development is, that, Messianic Judaism is a relatively new thing. I mean, Jews were, the Judaism that I'm familiar with and that, has long been the mainstream Judaism is to not really care about the Messiah very much, okay? To accept the fact that, that's going to happen sometime in the far off future. The prophet Elijah will let us know when. So we have the Passover and we invite him in to our homes on Passover. And every time, you know what he says?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
He says no, he's not coming this year, but next year in Jerusalem. Okay, so it's always put off. Okay, put off, indefinitely put off. Right? I mean, there's no narrative that ever ends with the Messiah coming. The Messiah is always to come. Okay, if that makes any sense. All right, it's just not like, but in the sort of more recent developments in Judaism, I would say the radicalization of Judaism, which I think is kind of parallel to what's going on in Christianity or the Protestant side, you start to see the Messiah take like the same level of importance that Jesus's second coming takes to the Protestants. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm seeing what you're saying, because
It's
you're
like a
saying that
parallel
there's a way to
development.
marry those two.
Right. So they're going to meet. That's what I'm seeing. And they already have met, because this temple project I'm talking about with the heifers and the building the temple it's both groups. Okay. It's Jews that have evolved into Messianic Jews, and it's Christians that have evolved into, I guess you would call them Christian Messianic Jews. I mean, they're the same now, except one believes that he came already and the other doesn't necessarily believe that, but they don't really care about their differences at this point, because they're both really active in, trying to get this to happen. Okay. And they want to appoint the Messiah. Okay. And they'll appoint him from Israel. Okay. I think you're seeing a lot of Christians going to Israel now under these beliefs, because they want to be in on it. Okay. They're putting a lot of money into it. Okay. The marriage between Netanyahu and Trump in the political sense is sort of tailor-made for this. So I think it's a real point in Trump's favor getting elected. And I think that's the direction we're going to see. Okay. So if you are concerned about this as a misrepresentation or a misinterpretation of the Bible, I mean, it's going to dovetail with some really, really concerning political events. I mean, that's what we're in for.
Yes, because this is part of the reason why, because I was mainly focused on politics, and then I started noticing how a misunderstanding of Daniel is actually leading to a lot of misunderstanding about politics. When people start tying this red heifer stuff and looking for a third temple, because at one point they tried to build a third temple back in like around 300 AD, and when they tried to build it, the Christians were saying that this is like the work of the antichrist.
Well, my thoughts on that. Okay, I mean, I think there's been a movement to build the third temple for a long time. I think it's been very much underground. I think when you're talking about Freemasons,
Well, I mean, these people, these Christians, though, back in like I think it was around 380. I can't remember
Right.
what exact article I was reading.
Well,
But I mean, like,
why were they going on those crusades all the time? I mean,
well, those would be the Roman Catholics. I mean, I feel kind of like I got tipped because your wife's Catholic, and I feel kind of bad. But
no, go for it. No, you
Okay.
got to do it. I mean, look, there's no love for the there's no love for the Catholic Church, okay, in this house. I mean, you know, I used to talk about the Bible all the time with my late mother-in-law, who, I mean, that was you know, I mean, she read that every day, and she was as well versed in the Bible as anyone I've ever met. And she didn't speak much English, but we would, because my wife's Korean, but we would get into very, very, very long discussions about, you know, I mean, you know, she unusual for Catholics. She was very well versed in the Old Testament. Okay,
that
so
is
she was
unusual.
very unusual. She was, and she would argue with the priests. By the way, they hated her. Okay, because she was convinced that they got, you know, much like you, that they got passages in the Bible wrong. Okay, and that they're misleading the parishioners. Okay, I mean, she was convinced of that. I mean, she made, you know, my wife's upbringing a living hell, because every time they went to church, her mom would get in like a fight with the priest, and he, you know, over interpretation, and he would he would push them out because he wanted to get rid of them. Okay,
Right.
so we're not talking about like your normal sort of like
Okay,
Catholic
so I don't have
approach.
to tiptoe.
No, please
I want
don't.
to kind of be very careful about how I phrase, because it's not like I'm saying this stuff out of, you know, meanness or anything. This is just like I've like you know, since 2000, when I started realizing both sides were controlled, I'm like, there's something behind both sides controlling them. And I had a lot of people try and tell me, oh, well, Israel's controlling both sides. But I start running into problems thinking that, because I'm like, well, why would Israel want our southern border open? Those are 90% Catholic. Those are countries that are 90% Catholic. And I started reading, like, you know, other books about the Rome's responsibility for the assassination of Abraham Lincoln by Brigadier General Thomas Harris, who wrote this in like around 1890. And he wrote how all 10 co-conspirators behind the assassination of Abraham Lincoln were Roman Catholic. And he was someone who oversaw the trial. And so as I'm putting all this together, I'm like, okay, so that kind of this is starting to make sense, because John Surratt was found hiding out as one of the Pope's bodyguards. And then it's like, you know, I fast forward to today when I'm seeing that our borders are wanting to be left open, but I see mainly Catholics controlling the Democrat Party. It looks like, you know, it's like very like, because like when the first Supreme Court justice that was Catholic that was ever nominated was a Democrat. So, and it's like, and I start to look at, okay, your first Catholic governor, he was a Democrat. You know, all this, and as I'm starting to look through, and I know the Democrat Party is real big. It used to almost be like two parties in one, and all this stuff. But like, I start to just see, like, okay, Pope doesn't like guns. Democrat Party doesn't like guns. You know, Pope wants open borders. Democrat Party wants open borders. Now, if you start to look at it on Trump's side, Trump is like, I want to end anti-Catholic bigotry. Trump goes and nominates nothing but Catholics. And then it's like, look at these, but these are
How many
Catholics.
Catholics are on the Supreme Court?
7 out of 9, 2 Jews and 7 Catholics, and no Protestants.
It used to be, yeah, no Protestants.
Yeah, and our Protestant, our country was founded on Protestantism, right?
It went from like all Protestants to no Protestants.
Right, and so and
I mean, I'm sorry to be laughing. It's not. It's funny in sort of a like it's so in your face,
right,
and like ridiculous that it's like you know, but you know, no one says anything, and they just kind of like walk around like like, oh yeah, it's the same country it's always been.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is a great point. The same. They walk around like it's the same country it's always been. It's like the opposite. Oh
Right.
my gosh,
I mean,
that's
you
a
have to
great
find
point.
humor in it. I
Oh,
mean,
I
because
never
of,
even thought about that.
yeah.
How they do go, oh, it's like the same country. It's like, no, that's like the biggest red flag that it's not the same country. It's like that is so
But anyway, go. I didn't
understand.
mean to interrupt you. I'm
No.
interested in where you think the Catholic Church stands in all this, because I mean I have my own thoughts.
Um. Okay, so I basically think that, in a nutshell, without me being too long-winded about the whole thing, I basically think the Catholic Church is the one pulling all these strings in the world with all the governments and everything. And
Okay.
even with Israel, it's like if you ever read the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, now you'll
Right.
see like these popular guys like Adam Green and all these other people going,
Oh,
"Oh,
I
the Jews
remember
run the
that guy.
world."
You're talking about the YouTuber.
Yeah, and he'll be like,
He's
"The
like
Jews run the world."
he's like the Jewish guy who says he's a fundamentalist or
No,
something.
he's like the guy that says Jews run the world, Adam
But
Green.
but he's obviously Jewish himself. I
No,
mean,
I
he has
don't
a
think he's
Jewish name.
Jewish
He
himself.
claims not to be
Maybe he
Jewish.
might be. Because there are some people out there. It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm Jewish, but they run the world." I mean, there are a couple of those people out there, but to me, they're
Well,
not.
that's too First of all, running the world is too simplistic of a proposition. Because like I can tell you, I mean, they're not running South Korea and they're not running China.
That's
Okay.
like manipulating the world.
I mean, okay, but that's different from running it.
Okay.
And because when you go to, I mean, I spent my whole summer actually in Korea and Japan, and I mean it was like it would talk about like fucking being smacked in the face. I mean, when you spend time in like a totally different society, which is based on the principle of homogeneity and shared culture. And actually, like the Koreans have three religions, right? They have Protestants and Catholics and Buddhists. All right. And, but you really cannot tell the difference between any of them. All right. I mean, it's sort of a very secondary importance there, because, just being Korean is more important than anything else in terms of social cohesion. So religion is almost like an afterthought. All right. So that should kind of give you an idea of like how how tight that society is,
Yeah, I think it's kind of like that in Japan and
And
China. It seems like
Japan's
those
like that
Asian
too.
countries are a little bit more like that than.
Yeah, but it has totally different dynamics, okay, than what we're used to here. I mean, it's just completely different in terms of the level of trust that they have. Like, I mean, I was in Osaka in Japan, and I was just standing on a street corner with my wife and two daughters, and I think they were like buying some like you ever seen like that bubble tea? It's like sort of a very, very popular drink there, but they were getting it, and I was just looking around, and I noticed there was like this entire like huge, like it took up like I mean, you have to imagine Osaka is like a massively crowded city, like like just dense with people. Like it's way more dense. I mean, you really feel like you're just, people are rushing by you at all times. So even to like be standing on the street corner is like people are running by. And it was this huge building like filled with like cases of beer, and there was like nobody in there. Okay. So basically anybody could you could just grab a case of beer and just disappear into the crowd, and no one would ever see you again. Okay. I mean, because it was just so many people going by, and it was completely untouched. Okay. Completely untouched, completely unguarded. I mean, just imagine the level of trust that exists where you leave like an unattended building filled with beer in the middle of like a gigantic urban center, which is basically the size of Chicago. Okay.
That is incredible.
With
You
foot
think about
traffic, like you've never seen. Like Manhattan on like the busiest day possible. Like people, like if you don't watch, you're gonna get smacked by this constant people, and nobody is like taking any of the beer. Okay. Just imagine the level of trust you have in a society like that. Okay. So I guess my point is that you have these extremely insular societies that we're very, very unfamiliar with as Americans. And, you know, my takeaway from being there is that they're going to play a much bigger role in the new world because they are much more efficient and effective societies. And that's just like raw numbers. That's just raw sort of like human power. I mean, how are you going to be able to compete with that, you know?
Yeah, I mean it would be tough because we're not united here. It blows my mind that America's ran as well as it is with as much.
That's actually a good point. I'm actually surprised that like I don't see like I don't look out my window. I mean, I live in like the boondocks, okay? Like I'm in like farm country, but still close enough to Miami that like, you know, I mean, you know, people could conceivably come by. So we're in, but I'm actually surprised that like there's not like fucking like just complete mad chaos. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I mean, you see flashes of it on YouTube sometimes. People will film like people smashing and grabbing, you know, massive sort of shit going on in San Francisco and Chicago. And I was in San Francisco fairly recently, before we went to Asia, and I got to tell you, I mean that city is. I mean, have you been to San Francisco?
No, I haven't really been too much outside of Indiana except for Florida and
Okay.
Kentucky and a couple other places.
Okay. Well, like San Francisco, I've been to that city a few times, and it scares the living daylights out of me. Okay. Even during the good times, there's just something really freaking off about San Francisco. But you know that maybe might be just being kind of paranoid. But it's always had that like Tenderloin area, which is just inconceivable. Like, why is your most centrally located, what in any other city would be the most valuable property? Why is it like third world? Like, that's an insult to the third world. I mean, you're talking about like it's just open sewage, people smoking crack. You know, I mean, go look at videos on YouTube sometime. I mean, I don't know if you've ever looked for them, but
No,
I mean,
but I've heard stories about San Francisco being, just, people taking crap anywhere and all this other stuff, and just like being a nasty place to be at.
But there's no, from a urban planning perspective, why are you unable to do anything about it? I mean, what is wrong with there's obviously a society there, and there's something seriously like fucked up going on. What exactly is the psychology that's fucked up? Well, I mean, I want to get my finger on that. Don't you want to like figure that out? I mean, isn't that the $1 million question? I mean, maybe you already, have an answer. I mean, if you do, please tell me, because it mystifies me. I mean, and by the way, San Francisco, I saw the Tenderloin in the good times, and it's not like I didn't go recently, but that city has gotten really, really, really strange. Okay, there's like nobody, like even in the good parts, there's nobody in the streets. Like all the restaurants are shut down. I mean, it's like a ghost
town. That because I really have to think about that, because when you brought up that point about how in Asia, it's not like, in Japan and these other places, how like there's like a lot of religion, it's not like, so it's like, why are these people? Because you would think, it's like that if you're describing a place like that, you're thinking that should be a very Christian place, but it's not, right? And then here you got America that's supposed to be very Christian, and yet you have things like that going on there. And now I'm not saying those people that are doing all that smoking crack are Christian, but it's
But
just kind of
this used to be
weird.
not that long ago. This was a highly, highly, morally driven place, driven by Christian morality.
Right. And so I'm still
I mean,
trying to get my finger on what
when do you
happened.
think that ended?
Man, I would start to say it started happening around maybe the 50s,
Yeah.
maybe.
I think you're right, and I think it was deliberately. I mean, there's a lot of good, good theorizing that it was, deliberately a result of Tavistock, the Tavistock Institute in London, which basically generated the counterculture as a, as a means to fulfilling the Aquarian prophecy, I guess they call it, right? So, this gets into the theory that there's something occultish going on in
See,
the
I
West.
almost wonder if people are like someone, that's trying to manufacture things that go on in society, try to manufacture, I guess like division and whatever. If they do something on purpose to make groups feel at odds, and to stir up anger, and somehow, and you just keep feeding into this, feeding into paranoias, feeding into things, and even doing things to make the paranoia seem somewhat justified, and you just create these events, you create these things that go on, and somehow it leads people down these paths. Like it's something I'd have to really think about, because I do know that they do try to create various groups, and try to get people upset about, just the weirdest things, and just like, make up complete lies about history, and then get people to believe them, then get people to be upset about them. And because like, I always think it's kind of weird that, people kind of forget that the Republican Party was supposed to be the party that wasn't racist, that ended slavery, and that, the Democrat Party were the ones that, were fighting against freeing slaves and things like that. And it's like, people have lost touch with what the Republican Party is. They've lost, and now it's like if you just think, there's like young people that grow up thinking a Republican equals racist. And it's
Right.
like, and I'm
Right.
still holding on to like, well, no, Republicans were against all that. And I'm trying to make the party be about that, more. And we should look at these other people like Trump as infiltrating it and trying to bring it down.
Right.
And we need to do something to get these people out of here. But a lot of people, they just already have it in their mind. No, it's like Republican Party, the anti-drug party. And I'm like, well, no.
Right.
If you think about it, the Democrats are the ones that start all the drug laws and things like
Right.
that. It wasn't, you guys only know about Ronald Reagan saying no, say no to drugs and doing things, but those laws were already starting to put into action back with Democrats, wanting to control like what Mexicans and blacks got to do, and
Well,
and so
the regulation of drugs is, I mean, that may, I guess the question that is on my mind from all of this is, as you say, okay, this stopped being a moral country in the 1950s. That's the sense it's a broad question.
yeah,
but
there's a lot of nuances. So
right, like you're saying that you have a theory of who was behind the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, which suggests that we can detect conspiracies to disrupt, at a, at the earliest stages of the republic. But, let's just, go with the 1950s, for the sake of, short circuiting, and I guess the question, which is, if somebody, it's real simple to me. If somebody is making it an aim to disrupt morality, then the question that follows from that is, who could that possibly be? Who could possibly want to be disrupting morality at any given moment in time?
Again, a lot of this to me, people are not going to like this, but I think it kind of falls on the Vatican a little bit, because they were the
Right.
ones that wanted to fund politicians that were
Right.
mainly Democrat back in 1840 to remove the Bible from public schools. And I think when
Right.
you remove the Bible from public schools, you remove the foundation for morality, because now you have man deciding what morality
Right.
is. And I
Right.
think, and whether you're Christian or not, I
Right.
mean, even back when I was like kind of going through this atheist part, I was like, well, I think we should at least default to the Bible, because you got to have something, because we can't have it come from man, because man makes that too wide. So let's default to the Bible, since the country was founded on the Bible. We'll just default to the Bible until we can at least think about something better to replace it, right?
Right.
So,
And it wasn't founded by Catholics in most parts. I mean, I guess some of the colonies were more Catholic in character, but
some like Maryland, but
yeah.
it wasn't even that much. You're talking
Well,
like
but it was an
10%.
identifiably Protestant place. So I think when your answer applied to the United States, I mean, it sort of makes sense structurally. I would say, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm suggesting maybe a broader definition that encompasses the Catholic Church at some level, but I would say it's the occult, and the occult includes the Catholic Church.
Well, yeah.
Do you agree with that proposition? From a theological perspective?
Kind of, because I just think there was compromise and corruption early on, like, because I think everything goes all the way back to the Roman Church back in 100, before 100 AD, before they even had, called it the Catholic Church, and they just referred to Christians in general as Catholics, like a
Right.
universal faith, but it wasn't
Right.
like, oh, that when you say Catholic, you mean the Roman Catholic Church.
The Catholic. So hang on. This is interesting. The Catholic Church traces its claim to authority to who? Saint
Peter. So
Right.
they say
say,
Jesus said, "On this rock, I'll
what do
build
they
my
claim?
church."
Yeah. So the rock. Say that again about the rock.
Okay, so this verse in the Bible, Jesus goes, "Your name is Peter," because Jesus says, "And I believe you are the Christ." And Jesus goes, and on this rock I will build my church. But what a Protestant and any non-Catholic would say is that when Jesus says, "On this rock I will build my church," he's just talking about the faith Peter has in
Right.
Jesus. So that means having faith in Jesus is the rock, the
Right.
foundation.
So
Whereas
it's
the Catholic
interesting.
Church says, no, it's being built on Peter, and
Right.
Peter's the
Now,
first pope.
First, do you notice the structural similarity between that phrase in the Bible and the Temple Mount discussion?
Yeah, see, I think it is
So
a
you have a
similar thing going
recurring
on.
pattern. So keep that in mind, right? Narratives will often sort of fold onto each other and sort of repeat. So, if that's another reason, and I hadn't thought of that before we had this discussion, because I never really gave, I haven't really explored intellectually the foundations of Catholicism, and well, let me ask you this, okay? I mean, Catholicism has always kind of confused me because it's like not just a religion, but like a a nation state unto itself in its structure. I mean, it has its own legal system. It actually has its own country, the Vatican, where it has real sovereignty. I mean, it used to have a lot more territory, and oftentimes people would give lands to the Catholic Church. So, in that way, it's sort of different from other religions, and yet also similar to Judaism, which is also, both sort of a religion and also an ethnicity, which is also kind of weird when you think about it, right? I
Right.
mean, why do we suddenly merge ethnicity and religion into the same identity? So for me, like, I don't practice any of the rituals of Judaism, okay, but my ethnicity is 100% Judaism. So we just refer to me as a Jew without making any distinction between me as a religious Jew and or just like a Jew who happens to be an ethnic Jew. But hey, I could convert to any religion and still be an ethnic Jew, right?
You see, here's my question. Like, if I call you like, because I think I think that's confusing because I would consider myself Jewish, even though I don't have no ethnic Jewish background, but I believe the Jewish scriptures. So I'm sitting here going, I'm a Jew as far as I'm concerned because I believe your religion. So I'm a Jew, and I
Right.
have Christians fighting with me, going, you can't call yourself that, and then some are agreeing I can call myself that. And I feel like according to the Bible, I can because I believe,
Well,
that. So that's what I'm kind of asking you, like,
so
what
here's
would
what
be the right
here's what
term?
my Jewish response to you is on that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'd like to hear
is
this.
like, if you really want to like pursue being a Jew these days, the Jews actually make it very easy in America. You just have to show up at like your nearest Chabad and say you're interested in Judaism, you really believe the scripture, and they'll just start talking to you, and like they'll invite you to their they really don't care about ethnicity. Okay, it's not important to them. Okay, they're on sort of like how like certain churches are very proselytizing. Like
Right.
that's a big part. I mean, the Mormons are kind of like that. I mean, you spend some time in a mission. I mean, that's kind of an odd little quirk for a religion. I mean, you have to go to another country for 2 years and like convert people to this religion. Like, and
Right.
that's something you have to, I mean, heck, that would really, I mean, I don't know if I would like that or not like that requirement if I was Mormon. I mean, it seems kind of difficult. I mean, to like have to do that, but maybe it's one of those things that really binds them together. I don't know, but if the Jews are sort of in their proselytizing mode in general, and they're putting a lot of money into it. So I would look for if you were very serious about pursuing it, I would look for like the nearest Chabad near you and just like go to their website and just like show up and start talking to people.
Well, the thing is, though, it's like, but I believe in Jesus too. I just
Yeah,
feel like, so this is,
they would still
and
talk to you.
okay, because this is where I wonder if I'd be
I'd be
offensive.
interested to hear them talk to you. I don't know if because they're not wired to like really want to reject you,
Okay.
and they're very proselytizing, and they may just like talk to you and be very interested in I mean, I myself have no affiliation with the Chabad and I've never been there, but my understanding is like you can just kind of like show up and participate in the rituals, and if you they're really not like like looking you up and down if you're not like ethnically Jewish, because like I said, the political environment right now in Israel is controlled by Messianic Jews who again are affiliated with Messianic Christians. So they may be more comfortable. So if they perceive you as a Christian, then they will perceive you probably as the type of Christian that they like talking to. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, because I'm actually thinking about talking to more of them, because it's like I'm kind of.
Is there any Chabad near you?
I have to look that up because I never heard that term, to be honest. So
That's
Chabad
yeah,
is a new term.
Chabad. I mean, it's like sort of the proselytizing. I mean, they'll at least like direct you in the right, as long as just like spell out like what why you want to get to know the Chabad. I mean, it's like basically it's like I would say a proselytizing sort of arm of Judaism, which is very weird because traditionally Judaism is a non-proselytizing religion. Okay. I mean, and the last thing a Jew would ever want to do is proselytize. But I was like, for the first time in my life, I was proselytized to myself by the Chabad when I was in my old law office in Miami, and suddenly these two men just like walked into my office, and they asked my wife, is Jared Beck here? And they proceeded to like tie the tefillin around me and do a prayer with me, and really wanted me to come to the Chabad services. And it was clear that they were like, I mean, I'd never seen such proselytization from a Jewish person before in my entire life. And so it's like a completely new development.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Because I've never heard about it. So when you said it's a new development, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So,
well, I mean, it's an old sort of, let's say, school of Judaism, but its sort of proselytizing form is a new development, because Jews were not a proselytizing religion for, I mean, if you think about their history, it was like sort of a, at least as far as Western history is concerned, it was sort of a disfavored religion. So, I mean, why would you go out there and, you would stick, with other people in the same disfavored religion. I mean, it's generally what people do. They become.
Well, it's also not like they had internet and cars. And
right.
So is it how safe
this was the only media going was religion,
how safe
right?
is it to walk over to the next town or ride a horse over to the next town when it might be a hostile town, and now you're a Jew gonna go talk to them and tell them a bunch of stuff they don't want to hear? I mean,
right.
And it's not like they got cameras. Like people are
right.
like, okay, we're gonna put this on the internet if you beat me to death. It's
right.
like, no, you just disappear and no one even know, right?
Well, I mean, that's the other thing, is that their quality of life was much different back then. And religion played a much different role. I mean, it was really the only thing going, right? That wasn't, like making a living. It's what religion you were in. There was no internet. As you said, there was no internet. There was no, there's no TV. There were no cars. I mean, you were basically sitting in your same little town and going to the church or the synagogue, right?
And some of these places also made it illegal to preach, like the Roman government. If it wasn't an approved religion, you couldn't just go preach a religion in the Roman government. It had to be approved. That's why they were trying to call Christianity a new religion, so it wouldn't be protected. Because at first Christianity was just seen as a Jewish religion, because Jesus was seen as the Messiah of the fulfilling Jewish scriptures. So Jesus is just this Jewish Messiah fulfilling Jewish scriptures. So it wasn't supposed to be seen as a new religion. And to me, it seems like there's something that happened after 70 AD where suddenly, I'm reading in the
Well, I
Bible.
mean, did Rome, basically just transform itself into the Catholic Church?
And that's sort of what I think I see, but it's not as easy as that, because I think it started out with some Christians compromising more, going, okay, we're not like, there's anti-Semitism going on. They just had this war with Jews. So I think they're trying to create some separation from the Jews, being like, or making themselves feel better. Or like, oh no, I'm not like those Jews that rejected Messiah. We're better. And then, but okay, but you guys are doing the same thing. Okay, well, let me do things differently. Let me have Easter Sunday instead of Passover. Let me observe Sunday instead of observing Sabbath, and I wonder if there's just things like that went on. And then, we have the story of like Polycarp talking to the Roman bishop Anicetus around 150 AD. And basically they were having this argument over Passover. And I think they probably also, in my opinion, I think Polycarp also kept Sabbath. Some people argue about that with me, but the one thing but I think if you're going to keep Sunday, you would change it because based on how you view Easter and Passover, and that's going to tell you how you're going to view. Because if you just think, well, Jesus gets crucified on Passover and 3 days later he gets resurrected, why are you going to think, Sunday's a special day? You're going to think any day 3 days from Passover is a special day if you're going to celebrate the resurrection, right? So, but if you're thinking that Jesus rose on Sunday and you're going to have Easter Sunday, and now you got this yearly Easter Sunday, why not have a weekly Easter? That's how I think it evolved. But anyway, I see Polycarp getting in a debate with the Roman bishop Anicetus, and he's like, Polycarp, all the early Christians I know of agree that he actually discipled under the apostle John. And he's like, well, I was taught this by John, and Polycarp's talking about how he's taught Passover by John. So, and when I'm looking at the New Testament, it looks like they're basically doing the same thing, going to Sabbath, observing Passover. I don't see Sunday observance, and I don't see Easter Sunday in the Bible. So, but Anicetus says, well, I learned this from, or I was given authority from the apostle Peter and Paul, I think is what he said. But Polycarp was asking for the proof, and he never provided proof. But we see proof in the New Testament for what Polycarp observes, but we don't see for what the Roman bishop observed. And then you got this thing called apostolic authority and apostolic succession, which the Catholic and the Orthodox churches like to claim. And they go, and that's where they put in my opinion, they put the church above scripture and above, so they got these traditions, and it's like, well, the church is made holy. And so now these leaders of these churches are elevated to this position they shouldn't be in. And because you're elevating these leaders, now these leaders got a certain control because, wow, they got higher authority than scripture is what it looks like. Because I can't find the things they're doing, like praying to dead saints. Like no Jew in the history of Judaism ever prayed to a dead saint, to my opinion. But you got the Catholics and Orthodox praying to dead saints, worshiping Mary.
No, right. They definitely so what do you, the saints come in because there's a pre-existing layer of pagan gods that are incorporated.
Yeah, I think like hero worship. The Romans were worshiping heroes.
Well, it's it's like there's a war for followers that all these churches are conducting against each other. And why not just take a bunch of people that are already if you're trying to increase the number of followers, like join forces with people that are already praying to pre-existing gods. It's like an acquisition in the corporate marketplace for churches, right?
Yeah, you make it a little bit closer to what they're already doing. So you create a Christianity that's a little bit more palatable. They can eat it.
Is that where the occult enters the picture? Is with the introduction of saints, dead saints, because now you're praying to dead human beings, right? Is that where the occult as sort of the worship of in various what exactly is the occult?
Well, see, that's
how do you define it?
I think once you start allowing that, what don't you start allowing? So once you open the door to that, Why do you not? Why do you stop there? Why wouldn't the door be open to someone that's a little bit more deceptive?
Where do Catholics say that the worship of saints is rooted in Scripture?
They try to use Maccabees. There's like something in Maccabees somewhere where they say, and all it says is like they said a prayer for the dead, but that's different than asking the dead to pray for you, right? Like if I'm praying for like someone that's passed on, that's different. Like if I'm like, okay, my grandma's dead. Hey,
oh, that's right. So when you're wait, hold on. I wasn't really cognizant of this, but when you're praying to a saint, you're actually praying for the saint to pray to
God or something, or yeah,
that's so weird.
God for and the Bible clearly says there's only one mediator.
Well, that's clearly some pre-existing pagan structure where you would go to an idol and you would do a burnt sacrifice, to the god that whatever Marduk or Baal or whatever god you were praying to, right?
Right. So I mean, to me, it's like they try to water it down, and it's like
So their only source is Maccabees.
It's Maccabee. They'll use something like they use all these different verses. I did a video on it, so I can't think of it right off the top of my head, but like I can send you the video sometime.
All right, well, I'll check it out sometime.
Because it's called like the deification, like something about how Catholics and Orthodox deifies the saints, but I can't remember the exact title of it. But that I go through all their scriptures they bring up, all their strongest scriptures. And it's like you can clearly see that they're misreading it, and reading other things into it. Because it's like there's not one instance where you see anyone seeing a dead saint and going, "Will you pray for me, dead saint?" Or Saint so and so, watch over me. Because you would think that Paul, after killing Stephen and stoning him to death, that he would have said something to Stephen. If that's the case, you never see one prayer to Stephen.
Why would you need this intermediary anyway? I mean,
that's the thing. The Bible says it's only Christ is supposed to be the intermediary that you need.
Well, you're not supposed to have intermediaries according to like the Scripture. So that's like would be a total textual contradiction. I mean, that wouldn't pass like legal muster if you were trying to push the issue in a legal brief. I mean, it's a matter of logic, right?
Well, see, and this is the problem with, and I'm sorry to say this, and I know this is offensive, but to 99.999% of Christianity, that's the problem. It's like you can see it. You're a lawyer. You look at this. You just look at it from a lawyer's perspective and go, "This doesn't pass, man."
Right.
And it's like, and just like that Daniel's 70th week, a prophecy in Daniel chapter 9. If you just know the Jewish calendar and a couple of historic dates, you can know that there's only one time frame that thing can actually be solved in. None of this other stuff makes sense. There's just no reason to interpret it any other way. Just based off of just basic understanding of just a little bit of the Old Testament, you would know you can't do anything else with it. And if it wasn't fulfilled that way, then it's an unfulfilled prophecy. And so you got those two options. And to me, all the dating, you got, most people would say Christ was crucified before 34 AD. You have the prophecy starting in 457 BC. So right there, that window, or maybe you might argue that the dating's a year off, but whatever the case, you got a window. You got the Messiah dying right around 30 to 33 AD is what a lot of people say. I think it's 31 AD on a Wednesday. So I got a lot of unpopular beliefs. I know you don't know me too well, but I don't believe that Friday crucifixion stuff, because Jesus said 3 days and 3 nights, and he's going to give you the sign of Jonah. And people tell you about that. You see, this is another problem I have with Christianity, because my whole life I'm growing up as a little kid. I'm like, how did you get 3 days and 3 nights from Friday? And the Bible says he rose before it was even daylight on Sunday. So you can't count the daylight of Sunday. He's being buried on Friday. How do you get 3 days and 3 nights out of that? And this is Jewish scripture, so you got to go by Jewish timekeeping.
Okay.
So how do you can't do that? You get maybe 1.5 night. I mean, you get maybe 2 nights in 1 day. So at the most, and that's if you count maybe an hour. If you say Jesus was buried in the grave, maybe an hour while there was still an hour of sunlight. I think it was much closer to being almost dark, so I don't even count that. But
so back to Revelations. Your view is that those events, like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the pale horse, the all that stuff, that's all happened already.
No, I don't have a full. Okay, that would be called full preterism, which means everything's fulfilled. I don't have that view. I'm still trying to figure out Revelation, because I don't think Revelation's a real easy book to figure out. And there's been some Christians that even wondered if it should be included in the Bible, right? But as far as Daniel goes, there's no reason to throw any of that into the future. Like, to me, it's ridiculous. But Revelation, I could see there's some wiggle room for how maybe someone can interpret that. But to me, a third temple, it doesn't even make logical sense. I mean, it's been 2,000 years. I think Jesus would have already had a third temple by now. It's like
right. I mean, the problem is that the Jews will say that, or the Messianic Jews will say that it only happens, the temple can only be built when the Jews control the Temple Mount. So really only in recent history since 1948. And who was behind the creation of the State of Israel? The Rothschilds, right? And, so, we're talking about, I guess from your end, early Christianity, right?
Right.
And from this other end, the modern end, the birth of Israel. And you're saying, that it's unusual in that, 1900 period that there were no serious efforts to build a temple.
Yeah, I just think that the fact, not that there wasn't no efforts, it just never got built for that long. Like, that seems like that's a long time not to build a temple. That's like,
well, the problem is just like you have to have a critical mass that want to build the temple. All right. If nobody, like, if you don't have enough, like, I mean, building, sort of like doing a project like that, if you truly believe that it has to be done by the Jewish people, then you're putting sort of a burden on a set of people to do something that it may not have the desire to do for a very long time.
Yeah,
I mean, that's my problem.
I don't even think they should even be having Israel right now, because they said that, like, the way it was obtained was not even the right way. They expected it to be, oh man, what was that? Like they might have expected like a Messiah or something to lead that. Not the way they took back control of Israel. I can't remember the exact.
You mean like the what are you referring to?
I think I'm referring to, because I saw some Jewish rabbis saying that, even like how Israel was created recently, like, back in 1960 wasn't even like, according to Jewish scriptures, like, it shouldn't even happen that way. It needed to happen a different way.
No, I mean, there are Jews that believe it should never happen. In fact, there's a sect of Jews that's a very, very literal in its interpretation of Jewish law, and it believes that the state of Israel is an abomination, and an abomination to Judaism, and they protest with the Palestinians.
Yeah, that's those are the people I'm referring to. So you
That's
got
a
those.
Nuterai Karta, yeah, the guardians of the city.
Yeah, so they don't even think it came around in the right way. So,
Well, they actually believe that Jews should never have a homeland.
oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, and actually their view, I think, was more mainstream for a long time. It was only until Zionism came about, you know, by the same forces that developed Marxism, that you know, the idea of a Jewish state became anything to be desired. So if there are people that are sort of, you know, tuned into this narrative over many centuries, right? I mean, you know, you may say that they, you know, incited those doctrines um, and those events precisely in order to lead to the conditions necessary for the coming of the Messiah based on their interpretation of Revelations.
Okay. So, um, oh man, my mind just spaced a point I wanted to make. I'm sorry.
Well, hey man, hey, it's been a great
Yeah, we have
interview.
been 3 hours, man.
I think we've given the your viewing audience enough to think about
Yeah,
for
I would like to get more
yeah,
into like the whole cover the Hillary Clinton stuff and
yeah,
everything sometime in that whole Bernie
yeah,
Sanders, because I think that's like
yeah.
a really important thing that people kind of understand some of your lawsuit, because I don't think enough people have talked about, definitely not on conservative shows. I think that's, to me,
Yeah.
it's a real shame, and I think it shows you that there's something controlling most of these conservative programs if they're not having you on, because this was
Yeah.
a big issue that could have really
Well,
exposed the Democrat Party.
no, but they're control. I'm being straight with you. They're controlled by the same people. Okay.
Oh, I know that, but I'm talking about even smaller,
You,
so-called, oh, I'm supposed to be a truther. I'm supposed to be like a Republican
yeah,
truther,
but
like
these
real
guys.
news networks. And,
There was one guy named Anomaly that
yeah, him.
reached
There you
out.
go.
I
Didn't
don't
he?
know if you know of him.
Yeah, I know of
And
Anomaly. I don't
okay,
know him. I think me and him are at
let me
odds, but
let me think if any names stand out. He reached out. This bald guy, Stefan Martineau.
Molyneux, Stefan Molyneux.
Molyneux.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. He reached out. We had an interview. And I had an interview with Anomaly. You can probably find the Anomaly interview
Okay, well that's
on
cool. So yeah, at
YouTube.
least had a couple of people that.
You know, I mean, I would say that they're kind of the people you're thinking of,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. So I was hoping more people, I guess. Okay, so but that's good. At least they did. No, but I'm still thinking about maybe the people that they're not like a
I
Fox
never got
News.
like Joe Rogan attention. Okay, I never got Tucker Carlson
Yeah,
attention.
see Tucker Carlson. I
I mean,
honestly
right,
think.
right. I mean, come on, I'd invite to Tucker Carlson. No, Fox avoided us like the by the. Now here's the. Let me tell you the interesting thing that we have to put in the picture here. Okay, my wife was a darling of the liberal media for several years because she was involved in the Trump breast pump incident, which you may
Okay.
not know. Do you know about it?
No, I don't know about that.
Okay,
Yeah, I just
it was an
barely heard about that.
anti-Trump. It was an anti-Trump op run by the New York Times in just as he announced. And my wife was contacted by a reporter at the New York Times, and she agreed to basically recount our encounter with. Yeah, because I told you we deposed him like 3 different times. Okay,
Right.
and the first time was actually an incident where he got like really angry because my wife needed to take a break in order to use her breast pump. okay, because she just given birth. Okay, so he didn't want to take the break, and he got very angry, and he screamed at her, and we were gonna take the issue to court, and we were contemplating getting sanctions against Trump, but we decided not to, and worked it out with the attorneys on the other side of the litigation.
I gotta say, that's something that kind of makes me pretty mad to hear about Trump doing that.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. We were able to work it out with his attorneys, and he appeared for another deposition in West Palm Beach, and he was like completely like nice and docile and friendly.
That's cool. You probably.
And then we did a third one in New York.
You were way nicer than I would have been. I can say.
Well, but my profession requires that, though.
Oh.
That's sort of the as a lawyer at a deposition, there's certain conduct that you can't engage in.
Right. Yeah, it's just one of those. That's one of those things I'm kind of like I think should be encouraged. Women to do that. Like to breastfeed their children because it helps increase their intelligence level from everything I studied. And I think
my wife was big on breast milk.
Yeah, and so I think anytime
I think there's intelligence levels, and I think also stay away from fluoride in the water.
Yeah,
I don't know like what your situation with that is, where you're at, but
I steer away from fluoride as much as possible.
Yeah, we're on well water, so we're not tapped into the city supply. So I only do full control over water, because fluoride is fucking poison, dude. Oh, I'm sorry to have cursed, by the way, but it's getting late. It's
a Christian show. I'm trying to keep it cool, man. Because my whole thing about that is, it's not that I haven't done it, but I just, as far as the show goes, I know some people are looking for like a show that's got some intelligence to it. And I notice a lot of shows cuss, and then people can't watch them because they're like, well, I got in the room. So I'm just trying to keep, the language.
No, you're totally right. And it's, it's just my, I think when you're like, unfortunately, I have a bad habit. Like the more tired I get,
okay. Well, I'm sorry, man.
No. But I mean, I'll continue. I'll continue to go as late as you want, but like I can't guarantee I'm not going to drop more
I love
F-bombs,
having you, man.
I'm losing control. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Hey, look, why don't I just have you on again? Because I'd love to have you on again sometime. Yeah. And I mean, you're great to talk to, man.
No, sure. Well, we can schedule sometime soon, but. I think the bottom line is, I keep doing what you're doing, because I think people do actually need to, whatever the angle is, they probably don't know scripture as well as they should.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make people think a little bit and trying to get them out.
It's cool, man.
That's kind of why I have you on the show, is because it's like, look. Here's a guy, and he's he used to support Sanders. I mean, then he did this lawsuit, and just kind of like, because I feel like some people will have a fight about politics after this election, or even leading up to it, and
right.
And it's just like,
the tension levels are going to go big time. The tension levels are going to go big time, and they're going in all different dimensions, and they're going to. If Trump wins, all of the red cities are going to go bonkers. Not red cities, blue cities. All the blue cities are going to go bonkers, and they're going to be directed to. I mean, do we have such short memories that we don't remember the first time Trump got elected? I mean, wasn't it like open season in American cities for like like an entire summer.
Oh yeah, and they were given excuses for it, and mask. It's like, hey, you know,
Right.
it's like,
right. Oh, everyone's got to wear a mask to conceal their identity. How convenient.
Oh,
People
God.
are like wearing like full burqas, you know, like smashing, grabbing into liquor stores and stuff. And like things are like burning down. And oh yeah, they arrest some election day protesters who like, but like they just like sat by and let all these people like burn like the basically the cities to the ground for like an entire summer.
And he gave them all the protection to do it, man.
Well, when my wife grew up in Koreatown, she went through the Koreatown riots, and basically they basically these forces got unleashed on Koreatown, and basically they had to defend the city with their because everyone in Korea has to serve in the military. They all had, you know, military issued weapons, and they got on their roofs and they, you know, defended their cities from the rioters.
Yeah, which is what I think should have happened, but they made it sound like, well, if you even say you got to defend yourself,
Right.
like, oh
Well,
my
they've
gosh.
totally gone away from that narrative in a matter of years, right? And that should concern us, because this is like the pivotal moment in my wife's development as an American. Because at that moment, I mean, she, you know, her position is that, you know, the Koreans, you know, that was like a pivotal moment for the Korean Americans when they were finally accepted, is when they actually armed themselves and started shooting to protect their property. Then other Americans are like, you know, you're just like us. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So this is concerning that we have like, you know, we're sort of now the prevailing ethos is if you protect your property, you know, you're a criminal.
Yeah, that's why oh
I mean,
man.
something's going on here that's severely sinister.
Yeah, you
Anyway,
shouldn't be afraid to protect your own
I
house.
should probably get going.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
getting.
Sorry, Jared. I don't mean.
Yeah, no worries, man. We could probably talk all night.
All
It's
right,
great.
man.
It's
Loved
great.
having you on, man, and thank you, man.
Hey,
It's
it was really good talking to you. I look forward to our next discussion.
oh man, it was great, man.
Okay.
Thank you, man.
Okay. Keep
All
in
right,
touch, man. Okay.
later.
Bye now.